It was a bog standard and some would say a very poor decision yesterday by ratings agencies. Standard and Poor to downgrade South Africa. Very good morning to Evan Jensen. I'm with Elvis President.
Yes, Eben, it's a dire morning for South Africa. We've been downgraded by one of the ratings agencies and we expect another, Moody's, to make an announcement this week, either today or even Friday. So it is not looking good for South Africa. So that's why we're asking you this question. And for course this morning, we want to find out from you, what do you make of all of this? And the question of the day we ask, what do you make of the ratings downgrade by S&P? And of course, as you know, that we're waiting Moody's later this week. So let us know on the Twitter handle as well as on the Facebook page. Yeah,
we also are conducting a poll today, of course, on the leaders of the Khoe, the San and descendants of those that want the term coloured. Yes, coloured, a very divisive term in South Africa, scrapped from the racial vocabulary as well as official documentation. So we've been putting this up for you. This is what we're asking you, Elvis.
Should the race label coloured be dropped in South Africa? That is the question. 155 votes in. 55% of you are saying yes, and 45% are saying no.
Yeah, lots of opinions coming in, as you can understand. Malibonga Manyonya says, dropping race label coloured would be because it's their identity. But what about the history of that identity, Malibongwe?
Kagiso says, who or what will we be calling them then?
Do we need a label? Do we need a label? Do we need to label everybody in South Africa?
Does there have to be a label, or are we not all Africans?
Or South Africans, for that matter. Lechasa says, no, 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 and their future name.
There's a question there from Lechasa. This one from Sipo says, yes, because they are black people. So I don't see any reason to call them colored.
Absolutely. Sipo Mahoro is on point there today. And Kolani Sisamtembu says, colored is the colored, nothing will change. Well, we have to change. We have to change.
Well, there you have it. Those are some of your views. Keep them coming and we'll read them as we continue today. It's going to be an interesting debate. We have a number of guests in that's going to talk about this a little bit later in the program. But as you know, the big story is, of course, S&P and the downgrade and future outlook for South Africa. But right now, let's get down to business and take a look at today's headlines. Moody's Investor Services places government's Baa2 rating on review for a downgrade. President Jacob Zuma is set to face one of the ANC's top structures in an extended National Working Committee meeting over cabinet reshuffle. And the Colombian government declares a state of economic emergency in the southern town of Macau after almost 300 people were killed in mudslide. Now, those are all your headlines. So before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning, Kendall.
Elvis, a very good morning to you. Quite a lot happening in the world of sports. One of the big things that's happening out in South Africa today, for those that don't know, it's also the funeral of Dr. Petrus Molemela, which is happening out in Bloemfontein. Dr. Rantlai Petrus Molemela, he died at the age of 83. Lots of dignitaries that you can see right now. Dr. Ivan Khoza is in picture right now, standing to attention as the funeral procession is carried into the stadium. The coffin has been carried in right now on the red carpet. We'll definitely be crossing there a little later on just to bring you up to speed with what's happening at Dr. Rantlai Petrus Molemela's funeral later on. Now, this is what else we've got for you in the sports today.
Yes, say that once more. Chance for Jair! Surely a hat-trick, yes, a hat-trick!
Cape Town City FC crushed Chipa United 4-1, shooting to the top of the log on the back of Bongoletu Jair's hat-trick, the fastest ever in PSL history.
We owe FIFA lots of money. There are players that could not be paid. They are signing on fees.
Recently relegated Morocco Swallows now also face liquidation by FIFA for non-payment of former players and sign-on fees.
The court said that the City of Cape Town, we are within our right to proceed to claim back the 500 million rand.
And the City of Cape Town takes construction giant WBHO to court for price fixing during the construction of the World Cup stadiums and wins. All this and more we've got for you later on the Sports Bulletin. Be sure to stay with us. Do also stay with Elvis because he's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Moody's Investor Service has placed government's Baa2 rating on review for a downgrade. The move is likely to further shake investor confidence. It is prompted by the abrupt change in leadership of key government institutions and comes after Standard & Poor's downgraded South Africa to junk status.
After Standard & Poor's earlier decision to cut the country's credit rating to junk status, all eyes were on whether the other two global ratings agencies, Fitch and Moody's, would follow suit. What Moody's has done by issuing this statement is to put the government on notice that they are initiating a review for downgrade over the cabinet reshuffle, but also because it raises concerns about the future effectiveness of the country's policy-making institutions and the immediate implications for growth and public debt. The statement says the review will allow Moody's to assess these risks and whether the changes in leadership signal a weakening in the country's institutional, economic and fiscal strength. The review will also explore the implications of the underlying political dynamics which led to the changes in ministerial appointments for the predictability of South Africa's institutional framework, including the government's capacity to conduct sound economic policies which foster economic and fiscal strength. Buying its decision, Standard & Poor's said internal government and party divisions could delay fiscal and structural reforms and potentially erode the trust that had been established between business leaders and Labour. Sherwin Bryceby's SABC News, New York.
Meanwhile, Treasury has responded to the news that South Africa has been downgraded to junk status by rating agency Standard & Poor. It says that the status has lowered the country's sovereign rating, which affects debt denominated in foreign currencies. Treasury says the debt in rand still retains an investment grade rating. It says this constitutes 90% of South Africa's debt. S&P says the downgrade reflects divisions in the ANC-led government and the cabinet reshuffle by President Jacob Zuma that have seen the axing of the former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. S&P says the cabinet changes have put at risk fiscal and growth outcomes, and it will now become increasingly difficult for Treasury to borrow on the world market. Treasury says that the Finance Minister, Malusi Kagaba, has said government remains committed to stabilizing the rise in public debt. So political commentators and business leaders say they support the opposition party's plans to hold a joint mass action against President Jacob Zuma next week. They say political developments around the country's leader have dented South Africa's image in Africa and abroad. President Jacob Zuma reshuffled the cabinet where the finance minister, Pravin Gordhan, was axed along with his deputy, Nkabisi Jonas.
The political storm surrounding President Jacob Zuma's latest cabinet reshuffle is being felt beyond South Africa's borders. The sacking of Pravin Gordhan and his deputy, Nkabisi Jonas, is tarnishing South Africa's image as Africa's political leader.
South Africa's active role in Africa is diminished in a very big way. From what I hear when I travel around the continent, how people are worried about how we pulled back Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma from Africa. They feel that we use them because she only served for a month, a year, for one term, and nobody achieves anything in a term. There are all sorts of things. They may be wrong, but then there is that thing about South Africa diminishing its political legitimacy, political currency as a leader on the African continent.
Siphamandla Zondi says despite the public outcry and disapproval from opposition political parties to President Zuma's latest cabinet reshuffle, South Africa remains a leading democracy on the continent. Meanwhile, Sipho Pitjana, chairman of Anglo Ashanti, a global mining giant, says South Africa's economic future is on the line. Speaking in his capacity as leader of the Save SA movement on Monday, Pitjana says global investors have lost confidence in the country's leadership.
Where does it take the decisions? And it is a disconcerting matter. So to hide behind prerogative is in fact mischievous, because in fact We have political parties represented in parliament, not individuals. He is a leader of a political party that chooses to ignore, to create a destabilization of our democracy and our economic system. And it shows that levels of desperation on the part of the president.
Opposition parties plan to hold a summit to debate the state of the country. Tumalo Mohlaudi, SABC News, Tshwane.
Meanwhile, President Jacob Zuma is set to face one of the ANC's top structures in an extended National Working Committee meeting on Tuesday. That's today, over dissent within his party following the cabinet reshuffle. The top six met the president yesterday to air their concerns. Some publicly criticized the changes to his executive, including the firing of the finance minister. One of the ANC's alliance partners, COSATU, has now also placed the president's resignation on the table. This, while the South African Communist Party has already resolved that Zuma should go.
Which is a huge achievement.
Many are calling it the president's precipice,
Those issues must come back openly to the...
having to quell dissent in his own party
and I undertake to hold
over changes to his cabinet. His first point of call, the meeting with officials.
The past few days have been very difficult for the ANC, and I think they've been difficult too for the country. Officials have requested more time to clarify themselves. As you're aware that you quoted, some officials went into public about the statement. They must give guidance included to the NWC, so that the NWC does not just sit, but will take cue in terms of leadership from the officials. Now the extended NWC is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon at 2. Extended NWC will include chairpersons and secretaries of provinces.
And collective leadership.
While some in the ANC lambasted the three top six for criticizing the president.
It has nothing to do with the merits and demerits of the reshuffle, but it's a build-up towards this upcoming national conference of the ANC. And it's a build-up to discredit not only the sitting president of the ANC. President Zuma is not coming back. It's known, he's on record saying that.
Meanwhile, COSATU has put the recent developments in the country on the agenda of its Central Executive Committee.
It is the first time in the history of the ANC being in government that the President has reshuffled the cabinet without telling us or consulting us in that particular view. That in itself robbed us the opportunity to ask the President, because if he has called us and said, I want to remove this minister and all those things, we'll have asked him in good faith, why, President, are you changing these particular people?
Some analysts say it will be tough for the ANC to rise above this latest debacle.
The President has this prerogative to fire and hire. At the same time, that decision has got to be exercised, or that right has got to be exercised in a way that does not bring harm to the interest of the Republic. That's what the Constitution says. So in this case, the question is this decision in the interest of the Republic? And the chorus out there is that, no, it is not.
But the question remains, will the ANC emerge more divided or unified? Criselda Lewis, SABC News, in Johannesburg.
Now, following the abrupt change of leadership in the Treasury, of course, we are facing a downgrade. We got the downgrade already from S&P. We're waiting for Moody's to give us their indication either today or even on Friday. But let's take a look at the question that we posed to you. That question relates to this. What do you make of the ratings downgrade? Let's take a look at the tweets. And Eben, there's a lot of tweets coming through that people are responding to.
Yeah, we've got a lot of tweets.
This,
but before we go to the tweets, I just want to tell people we are at the JSC. We've got one of our reporters at the JSC there. We'll be live there. We'll be live there shortly. Nompu, as you can see, she's standing by to give us a quick update. She's also waiting for Mike Schuessler, of course, one of the foremost, one of the highly rated economists in South Africa, to give us his views as to where we are right now and what the immediate, medium and then longer term outlook is for South Africa. But let's take a look at your tweets before we do all of that. This one from Ishmael Kada, who says, Newsroom, South Africans are not impressed with junk status. Zuma, address that. No need for a shutdown, says Ishmael Kada when we're talking about The year of OR. Sir Lehotlanolo says a fundamental question is who rates the ratings agencies? Who funds them? We can't subject ourselves to neo-colonial structures. Yes, that is the question. And he comes back, he says, it's choreographed and scaremongering tactics for attention from radical transformation. These are, of course, they've been fined for colluding during the crisis in 2008 in the US. This one from Fela Sotobe, he says, there's a lot we can learn from America, and I mean it. Reason being, South Africa is the next USA regardless of political tensions at the moment. There's a positive outlook, positive spin on the entire matter. We'll be live at the JSC shortly to get a little bit more analysis and an update from Nompu, as well as one of our top economists. But before we get there, Elvis, we're also asking a question on a poll, of course, and it is something that continues to linger as one of the undercurrents in South African society, the term coloured.
Well, there are those that feel, especially some of the San and Khoe leaders, that feel that the term coloured is a derogatory term and should be removed from the statute books of South Africa. So we're asking you this question this morning: should the race label coloured be dropped in South Africa? Now, so far, 184 votes in. 56% of you are saying yes. There are 44%, and you've seen some of those tweets that says no, because what will the coloured be named there? What you
rising issue of note. Puti comes in and she says, they are blacks like everywhere else. Why continue to make things worse in South Africa? They are black people, nothing more, nothing less. But true view of Puti there. Yes, they are black people.
Matome says, what do coloured people want to be called? Whites? They think to be associated with whites will make them senior. Well, that's another point of a contentious point. That is,
contentious point, and one of those polar Africa, because these are the stereotypes faced with regards to identity and behaves in a certain way. I think if we're going to overcome our problems of race, we're going to have to overcome this one first. There's the generalization. We understand, Elvis. Fella says that's only if they don't regard themselves as true Africans. Then you can't be black, says Fella.
Teenage daughter is a new generation mixed race. What she is, peer pressure. Why must we still have this labeling? Well, good question there from Christian.
Christian, tell her she's a daughter of the soil. Her blood comes from this earth and will go back to this earth. It is what it is. We are all African, to be exact, so be it. If you want to be black, some say that's even okay. What do you say? Velile Ndimandi says, this is pure political to those who don't want change in the Republic of South Africa. I think he's referring to the junk status update. That was unrelated, as it were. Well, there's a lot in the news world. It's been a news week of note. Let's go over to the JSC now. Let's head over to Nompu. Nompu is standing by to give us an update. Let's go over to Nompu, who's at the JSC in Johannesburg. It looks like it's a bit jittery there today.
Thanks very much, Eben. Well, we're here at the JSC, where markets opened about 15 minutes ago, and the JSC, the all-share index, is actually in positive territory. The rand, however, is continuing to bleed. It's down by over 1%, hovering around 17 against the British pound, and just flirting with 13.90 against the US dollar. This is to be expected as traders and investors trade out of South African bonds, as we know that this is the impact of the Standard & Poor's deciding to downgrade us to junk status. Moody's has also come out with a statement saying that they are likely to also downgrade us. So come Friday, we can expect the worst. And the stocks that are particularly hit right now are financials. Financials, obviously, they bear the brunt of whatever happens in the economy. The expectations are that we're going to have lower economic growth. We're going to have more inflation as the rand weakens against other major currencies. As we import this inflation, the Reserve Bank will probably have no choice but to raise interest rates. The picture for the consumer, for the ordinary person on the ground, is not pretty at all. So as a result, financials taking a major hit. We need to see how long it will take before they start to come back. But chances are they'll be in negative territory for quite some time because of the implications of a downgrade. The winners at the moment are your usual suspects like gold. Gold is seen as a safe haven, so people jumping into gold at the moment. And also the mining sector doing quite well as well. And that will be a factor of the lower rand because most of these mining houses their markets are overseas and they receive their revenues in dollars, and when translated back into the weaker rand here at home, it's more return for them. But how sustainable it is for them to be successful is another thing, because obviously if our economy is not doing well, then sustainably, if they're relying on our economy as well in terms of custom, it's not positive at all. Eben.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nompu. She's at the JSE. She'll be talking to us a little bit later again. Hopefully she'll have Mike Schussler there to give us his views as to what is happening within the marketplace here in South Africa right now. But there's a lot of questions, of course, in the air, not just on air, but also online. In the online spaces where it's been going crazy for the last week. Let's take a look at what are the hashtags that are blowing up on social media right now. Of course, ratings downgrade. That's for all of you been following this. Or junk status, that's the other one. Yep, junk status is believed to be caused by the abrupt changes in key positions of ministers, such as the firing of Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan. Now, Standard & Poor downgraded South Africa to junk status with a negative outlook, I must add, last night. Yeah, some of the reasons how, or some of the ways this will affect you. Yes, it says, we'll pay more on interest, food and electricity prices will increase, and even less job creation. Thuli Madunsela says, fellow South Africans, there's no need to panic over the junk status. Processes are underway to restore good governance and maintain the rule of law. Advocate Thuli Madunsela with a positive spin on the entire junk status scenario today. Good to see that we are not abandoning hope, as it were. Then people are talking about this massive earthquake. 6.5, 6.7 points on the Richter scale that struck Zimbabwe, now about 250 kilometers away from the capital, Gaborone. A local citizen took this picture as he was in a supermarket at the time, and of course there you see the devastation as some groceries fell off the shop. We are very fortunate here on the African continent that we don't deal with massive earthquakes day in, day out. Further afield, of course, a story that has, ripped the hearts out of many. It's the mudslide. The Colombian government has declared a state of economic emergency, they say, in the southern town of Mocoa after more than 250 people are now confirmed dead. And this number, they say, is set to rise even further. Search teams are still digging and probing into dense piles of mud and debris for more bodies, and some say hopefully survivors. It's been considered the worst mudslide in the recent history of that country. Those are the hashtags that are blowing up in the news space today. Our picture of the day, this one comes from Anonymous Scandinavia. Yes, something from further afield. The second largest city in Russia, St. Petersburg, was hit by an explosion at the metro station. The train en route to the Technological Institute at the Senaya station was hit by a blast, and there you see some of the devastation happening. These are just some of the things elsewhere in the world as instability seems to be doing the rounds. Our comment of the day from Ulrich van Heerden, who says, we now have to be even more supportive and compassionate. South Africans are resilient. We can overcome the hashtag junk status. Yes, we need to stick together, not let these be tools that divide us. That one from Ulrich. A very nice tweet there. That's our tweet of the day. Let's try and work a little bit closer and be more resilient as a nation. That's where we're at. Let's go to the courts quickly. It's a quiet day there today, it seems, in the east of Johannesburg, where judgment in the bail application of arrested in connection with a robbery at the Tambo International Airport is expected to be heard in the Kempton Park Magistrates Court. Now, Spusiso Mnisi applied for bail last week Thursday, pending a trial date set for this crime. Now, several gunmen held up airport security more than 2 weeks ago now, and well, they were said to have made off with more than 20 million rand in cash. Others put the number much higher. Of course, the other suspects are also expected to apply for bail in this case. We'll keep you updated on that and what else is happening in the courts, but it looks the courts are a little bit dealing with a junk status hangover. Anyhow, we're talking about coloured identity, and should the term coloured be dropped both officially and unofficially here in South Africa? Professor Leonard Martin is with us. He'll be talking to us, giving his considered views on the topic a little bit later. We'll also speak to the Camissa Equality Movement on the line from Cape Town after the break to just give us their views on, well, coloured identity and should it be dropped, the name coloured, officially and unofficially. What's your views? Don't forget to tweet us after this break.
A top 5 rated horse racing event in the world, fashion is a highlight for those in attendance. All decked out in blue and white, the Lomorians Queen Plate is the premier event that kicked off everyone's social calendar.
That it was all part of my master plan to cast John Legend but deprive him of his normal instrument and give that one to Ryan.
The House of Truth is not just a name. It is a religion. It is a lifestyle. It is a conviction that drives us.
What really excites me is how people have kept it very simple and also played with the theme, and how each person has interpreted it in their own way.
To stay updated with all the current entertainment news, tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
Welcome back. You're back with us here on SABC News. Now, let's change gears. Coloured Mentality. It's an online documentary series that seeks to shed some light on what it means to be a coloured in South Africa. The series is the brainchild of filmmakers Sarah Summers and Kelly Eve Koopman. Now, they were supposed to be with us today, but unfortunately they're travelling, and we'll get them back in studio at some time in the next few weeks. Now, this documentary series consists of 6 5-minute episodes. Each installment of Coloured Mentality tackles questions such as what does it mean to be coloured, and do coloured people have a culture? These are questions that all South Africans talk about at length at time. Let's have a look.
My name is Kelly Eve. And I'm Sarah. And we are about to go on a journey to figure out our own heritage.
We're doing a 1,000-kilometer walk from Fort Beaufort in the Eastern Cape to the castle in Cape Town. And we're going to be guided by this really powerful group of Indigenous rights advocates, because that's what the walk's all about. It's about Indigenous rights and heritage and culture.
But obviously for us to take on a journey like this is quite an introspective experience, and so we have to kind of figure out what is our identities that we occupy in Cape Town as coloured people.
So we asked a bunch of people that we think are really cool and that we look up to, and we basically asked them, what is a coloured person?
What's a coloured person?
What is a coloured person?
I'm quite reluctant to use that term mixed because it implies that other races are pure.
I am mixed race.
Xhosa isn't anything pure. There's also been a lot of mixing going on there, the same with white people in this country.
I think most people, when they look at me, they automatically want to know what am I, or who am I, or where am I from.
Like, I almost feel embarrassed to say that for the longest time I did not want to be associated with that term, being coloured. you know, because the term was given to us.
Wat is colored? Dat sê nie waar jy vandaan afkom nie. Dit sê nie wie jou mense is ook nie. Wat verwyder al die geskiedenis van jou, want hy is regtig ons wealth.
When I talk about Cape colored, I'm talking more of an attitude than the color of my skin. So yes, I am a Cape colored.
I used to call myself so-called colored back in the day, but I think for me it's become rather important to identify as colored, and also in a sense as a Cape Muslim, whatever that may mean.
And I come from the era where we talked about so-called coloreds, and we put it in inverted commas because I rail against that title that was given.
It annoys me when prominent colored figures shy away from the term. And I'm like, oh my God.
I think we're just like a mixed breedy of everything that's happened, and you know, you like the special pot at the end of it all. You know, tastes good, looks nice because you threw everything in.
And I go to places like Oudtshoorn, and those people are colored over there, and there's a relationship that I have with those people. I can see that there are certain things that we have and things that we say that they also say.
I don't believe that it's a homogenous group. So I feel like, yeah, the term colored for me feels like an erasure of multiplicity of identities, of many identities.
And that's a problem. It's a real problem. So buying into this colored idea also buys into the hierarchy and says, like, I'm not black. I'm actually better than that. Although I can tell that I'm not white, and a white person probably still sees me as a kafir.
There's a sense of not really knowing what our history is, what our background is.
I don't think that the media is doing enough to give us examples of ourselves.
Us coloured folk or Khoe or whatever were the people in the Cape Province.
We should claim ownership of the fact that we were original peoples of the southern Africa, and that's who we are. We're original people, you know.
Want sy kan net claim die stap terug te vat en sê, okay, ek is 'n colored. Define what is colored for you.
Yeah, it's one of those issues, one of those questions that South Africa has to come to terms with going forward. And of course, many different viewpoints and many different takes, and we'll get into some of that now. But a non-profit organization advocating for the rights of previously disadvantaged communities, the COSATU movement for equality in South Africa, has embarked on a journey to the United Nations Human Rights Council to report South Africa on their failed human rights record against coloured and Khoisan people. Now, the NPO says there are many social ills in the coloured community, but no one is advocating positively for them. Now, to talk about this topic, we are joined by Jerome Lottering, who represents the organisation. Jerome, thanks for being with us. Thank you for joining us on the line at the last minute there.
Good morning, Evan, and good morning to your viewers.
Jerome, just give us an idea. Why did you report South Africa to the United Nations Human Rights Council, and where is that process now?
Well, Evan, a couple of colored people came together, and we looked at the situation that is happening in our communities, from the Cape Flats right up until the Limpopo province. Wherever there's colored people living, we have the same socio-economic challenges: the drugs, the gangsterism, the unemployment, the general decay of our communities. And we decided that for us to change the situation in our communities, we need to organize ourselves and start fighting or advocating for ourselves. Because as you see currently in South Africa, we, colored people, and by the way, colored people, a large number of colored people are descended from the Khoe and San people. So we were the first people of South Africa, and we are being reduced currently to being spectators in this country, especially in light of what is happening currently within the ANC and the other political parties. We don't see anybody, any big political figure, or even the civil society speaking up about what is happening in colored communities. I mean, in Cape Town, on the Cape Flats,
Jerome,
there are children dying every day, so no one's talking about that. And it's injustice to our people.
Jerome, what do you want the United Nations to do about this? Because you seem to have exhausted all avenues in South Africa.
Yes, so last week a week before last, we went to the United Nations Human Rights Council. We reported South Africa with how they're treating colored people in terms of black economic empowerment, in terms of affirmative action, in terms of how they're allowing our communities to go into a complete disrepair. And we want the international community to start putting pressure on the South African government to start giving South African colored people their rights, because why? Basically, nothing has changed for us. We're in the same situation as during apartheid. Government's got this restitution process where they're trying to get black people up to on a level playing field with the previous white regime in terms of economic status, but colored people are not forming part of that process. They've got all these fancy words of black industrialist programs, black economic empowerment, but it does not include colored people, those programs. So those are the things that we tried to the ANC National Executive Committee. They've listened to us, but the arrogance and they ignored us after our engagements with them. So we felt that we need to take it to the world stage, and we're not going to leave it there. We're going to take it even further. We're going to try and put more pressure on the South African government. So the world needs to know that there are colored people in South Africa. When the people come from overseas, they go to Soweto and Khayelitsha.
Jerome, I want to ask you in conclusion, we're running a question today. We're asking our viewers to vote on a poll on whether the term coloured should be dropped completely. The COMISA movement for equality, what do you want to happen to this race label coloured?
Well, for me, Evan, myself, I was termed coloured all my life, officially in the South African record. But I went on a journey of self-discovery. So I went back to see who my ancestors were. And as recently as 3 years ago, I discovered that my grandfather was a Griqua. My father then also exposed that he belonged to the Griqua church, that he was a member of the Griqua tribe. Yeah. And that's how I became to understand that actually I'm a descendant of one of the Griquas of this country, which are part of the First Nation. So for me, I would not want to force the Khoe and San identity down colored people's throats. I would rather prefer them to go on their own journey of self-discovery to find who they actually are. And then, if they want, they can then change the classification. You understand?
Yes.
So for us that know where we come from, like me, I would want to be known as a Griqua. That's where I stand personally.
Yeah,
but,
and of course. Thanks, Jerome. Thank you very much.
No, I'm coloured,
We've run out of time, Jerome. Thank you very much for giving us your views. That is a non-profit organisation. They're called the COMISA Movement for Equality in South Africa. Of course, they're taking South Africa to the UN Human Rights Council, saying that the coloured communities are not even showing up on the radar here in South Africa. Now we're asking you the poll. Let's have a look at what you guys are voting at the moment. We've got it's still on 184 votes. Well, can we update the poll, guys? Okay, let's take some tweets. That's where the poll is from a little bit earlier on. Marvin, the mentalist, says, Newsroom, we're all coloured. Calling people with their colours must be dropped. Who is black and white? Strong words. IG says, I'm not sure being called a derogatory term such as coloured is my identity. A view shared by many. Louis Corky says, if the coloured label gets dropped, then they should be called white. It is Jan van Riebeeck who created the colours in South Africa. If only it was Jan van Riebeeck. Everybody got involved on this thing, my brother. Everybody. That's why all cultures belong to the coloured identity. IG comes back, says, some coloured people are mixed race between blacks and Indians, whites and Indians. Some are Cape Malay, not Khoe San. That is correct. It is a rich mix. Mzolisi says, it's complicated. The issue of identity across not only coloured people, if they feel strong to change it, why not? It's their identity, says Mzolisi. Yes, keep tweeting us, keep telling us what you think. It's important. We need to talk a little bit more empathy for the position of our fellow South Africans. But we're going to conclude this first hour by talking to a man who knows all about the historical context. Let's go over to Alvis, who's with Dr. Leonard Martin.
Thank you, Eben. Now, as you know, we're asking you that question, whether or not that race label should be dropped.
Now, let me give you a historical perspective, and the doctor will weigh in on that. The Khoe and the San is a distinct Aboriginal people who survived colonialism, apartheid, and assimilation of their identity. This life lived is found in the political culture and the socio-economic challenges that they continue to face in post-apartheid. Not constitutionally accommodated, land rights respected. Their indigenous languages are not recognized to the point of near extinction. But at the same time, they have distinct gifts of life bestowed upon them, such as being genetically, listen to this, genetically the oldest habitants on Earth. Meanwhile, 1 million signatures have been collected by leaders of the Khoe and San and its descendants that want the term coloured scrapped from the South African racial vocabulary and the removal of all South African official documents. Last month, a group of about 20 Khoe and San leaders walked from Port Elizabeth to Bisho to raise that awareness of this derogatory term called coloured. They want us to believe that that term should not exist. Now, to take a look at the importance of the Khoe and San's legacy and their descendants' legacy, we are joined by social commentator Dr. Leonard Martin. Now, his doctoral research into racism is titled The Origination and Meaning of a Racial Genealogy of Western Power and State Civilization Paradigm. A very good morning to you, Doctor. I want you to, we've talked about this many times on this particular show, in relation to the San, the Khoe, the Korana, the Griqua, and how they fit into the South African narrative as a nation.
Well, I think we need to take a step back when we talk about narrative. Mm-hmm. The foundational narrative of modern South Africa is race, not non-racialism. Mm-hmm. We should not confuse the two. Mm-hmm. It's on that background we need to discuss the colonial impositions on the Khoe and San and the emergence of different subgroups like the Griqua. The Griqua are a subgroup of the Khoe. In fact, if we have to put it straightforwardly, the Griqua are a multi that are directly tied to the Khoe and San. Mm-hmm. They are not separate. Likewise, but I think it's very important to keep clarity by talking about the Khoe and San peoples or the Khoe mm-hmm. peoples. This is the background in terms of discussing what has happened in terms of colonization and what has happened to identity. I think it's also a question of South Africa educating its own history. We see things in directly distinct terms. Either you are authentic or you're not. Mm-hmm. Whatever falls in between. But let us roll Khoe and San peoples literally faced but also because of colonial violence, mm-hmm. the usurpation of colonial space, particularly starting in the Western Cape, and the emergence of modern South Africa. And with have a host of terminologies that emerge to make it legitimate for the colonialists, the white colonialists, to become the dominant class in South Africa. And they drew their terminologies from a history that goes back to India. The term coloured, mm-hmm. etymologically, arises out of the conquest of the Aboriginal people of India and the emergence of the caste system, the imposition of the caste system. And those who actually were born within that process were called Mala. Out of that came mulatto, mestizo, and through the Anglos, the English-speaking whites who came to South Africa, the term coloured was brought here. Mm-hmm. It is a term that is meant to structure hierarchy, to give respectability mm-hmm. to those who had imposed themselves as the modern dominant class in South Africa, the whites. Now, if we look at the issue scientifically, the colour white is a conductor of all the spectral colours of light, which would make the white people the most coloured. We should make whites the most coloured. But let's look at the reasons why they imposed the term or invented the term coloured here. It was to divest the descendants of the Khoe and San and the Khoe and San themselves from any title to land.
So removal from the history book, so to speak.
Removal from the history books, but also to the evolving social structure, social hierarchy of exploitation, the colonial structure. So the term coloured always carried with it the connotations of exclusion, social death, cultural death, because even culture assumed the notions of white, became inherent with the notion of white. We had white culture, a white dominant class, and of course, white space as the Cape became. So I think it's very important for us to go back and trace the etymological roots as to why certain terminologies were introduced. It was to erase the actual history of those people.
Now, the apartheid South African government repealed the Race Classification Act in June 17, 1991. Now, that term coloured, is it then even a race classification? What is imagination?
The white in the colonial period problem in terms of mixed people or people with a multicultural heritage being too close. And the terminology coloured became one of the earliest apartheid terms. I mean, with Bushman, Hot Knot, etc., etc. So the experimentation with the term was to actually create a social hierarchical structure, which we must say, for some reason, within the context of the democracy that we have today, became re-embedded in our constitution. Hence, what I would say is the phenomenal movement taking place in South Africa today to decolonize coloured identity and therefore to reclaim not only the history of coloured people, but to correct South African history.
Now, some Khoe and San leaders and groupings want the term coloured to be removed from the statute books altogether. Do you concur, and is that a legitimate request?
Well, Albert, let me put it this way. If somebody walked into your home and decided that your entire family from that period onward would be called dogs, that you would answer to the term dog, wouldn't it be legitimate to resist with all your might that type of power to dehumanize anybody? This has happened to what we call the coloured people today. Their multicultural diversity, their multicultural heritage has been erased from South African history due to this term. And again, we have to say that there's a puzzle as to why we have clung to this notion with our new non-racial constitutional dispensation. This is what worries a number, and of course, there is a legitimacy in terms of the movement now to eradicate that term.
Are the so-called colours then the descendants of the Khoe, San, Korana, Griqua, and are they entitled to redress and reparation in relation to the Khoe and San identity as well as land dispossession?
Let me put it this way. We will not be talking land question in South Africa today if it was not for the near genocide committed against the Khoe and San people. The land question arises with the Khoe and San people. All history is a testament to that in South Africa. Now, in relation to legitimacy of claims, all scientific the genome has shown that over 60%, the majority of coloured people are descendants of the Khoe and San, irrespective of looks. They are descendants, and it's the coloured women that are transmitters of these genetic markers that have been traced up until today. So, in a word, the struggle for land, the struggle for identity, in fact, the struggle for South Africa's identity, is all focused on the reclaiming processes that the Khoe and San have lodged in terms of our legal structures.
Doctor, I thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio. The term coloured, should it be scrapped? What do you think? Now, that was social commentator Dr. Leonard Martin. His doctoral research into racialism is titled The Origination and the Meaning of a Racialist Order, an anti-racist genealogy of Western power and state formation as a hegemonic civilization paradigm. We'll take a break. We'll be right back after that mouthful.
Technology is replacing labor, and that capital deepening heralds a very difficult situation going forward for jobs.
You know, the thing I see is a growing, vibrant democracy, which is something that we didn't have before. And that strengthens outcomes forcefully.
With various studies still being conducted into the competitiveness of data prices in the country, instituting policies to regulate the sector is still a long way off.
Often, politicians will want central banks to do things that are short-term expedient, but long-term dangerous for the economy.
Stay tuned to News Today from 3 to 5:30 p.m. here on SABC News.
Yeah, welcome back. With Newsroom here on SABC News, of course, we're dealing with coloured identity. Well, we're asking, should the term be dropped even, officially and unofficially, around the Braaivleis fires? Should we not mention it? Well, now, we've got our next guest up. You know, he's from the first Indigenous and Aboriginal Khoe and San nation of Southern Africa. Well, their quest for self-determinance and governance is history in the making. Now, their representative is Greg Fick. He's ready for us down in Cape Town. Very good morning to you, Greg. I'm going to speak to you properly after 10, but I just want to introduce you to our viewers who are watching now, and I want them to hang around for our slot after 10 o'clock here. But just give me a quick idea, Greg. We're asking viewers, should the term coloured be dropped officially in South Africa? How do you view this?
Good morning, Elvis, and even first of all, thank you for taking this opportunity to interview me. The term coloured, as you all know, is a classification that was given unto our people by the previous regime, the apartheid regime. The fact that it must be scrapped is not a question. The fact is that the term coloured classification was scrapped, it was repealed. Why it is still in use is only because I believe that the continuation of our oppression and discrimination on our people is persistent by the so-called democratic government as we today have.
Thank you very much, Greg. That's Greg Fick. You'll be joining me live shortly after 10 o'clock to expand on those views. But I've got a little bit of housekeeping to do here in studio before we go on. Of course, on our Facebook page, it's very busy there today. Don't forget to like our page. South Africa is poised to have a first black woman at the helm of the Supreme Court of Appeal after members of the Judicial Service Commission recommended that the court's acting judge, Mandisa Maya, be appointed to this position. Then we also see opposition parties believe filing another motion of no confidence in President Jacob Zuma is not a futile exercise. The EFF, the United Democratic Movement, the UDM, the Inkatha Freedom Party, and the DA, as well as some other parties, they gathered at Marks Park in Emmarentia to discuss the reshuffle. Then millions of families across the continent are displaced due to armed conflict and violence. Many spent years waiting to return to their homes safe. The African states are meeting in Harare to discuss how to improve implementation of the groundbreaking Kampala Convention to protect displaced people around the continent. That said, I've got Kendall Mahamati here in studio with me to quickly talk sport. And Kendall, the real story of the day is that, well, the unspoken hero of South African football. We've lost the giant, haven't we?
We have, absolutely. He's been likened to Nelson Mandela of football, Dr. Petrus Mulumela. He's even got a stadium named after him, and that's exactly where he's being laid to rest right now. A little earlier on, we're showing pictures of what happened a little earlier on at the bottom of the hour when the funeral procession was making its way into the stadium. Lots of dignitaries in attendance from ministerial dignitaries as well as SAFA executives and the entire Bloemfontein Celtic as well, and a lot of people from Bloem itself coming to say goodbye to Dr. Mulumela. He's known very much for the work that he's done, even when he was one of the architects of the National Professional Soccer League, the NPSL, which then gave rise to the PSL. So he's very well known and very high, seen and held in high regard by a lot of soccer people in and around the southern part of the country.
Talking about soccer people, exactly that is that the Free State football community is a very close-knit one, isn't it?
Absolutely. They're very close-knit. They're incredibly supportive of each other. There have been 3 teams that have come out of Bloemfontein, Mangaung FC, Mangaung United and Bloemfontein Celtic, which he purchased in 1975. And you know what? They've become probably the most vociferous and most vocal of fans in the PSL this year. So a great giant is being laid to rest today.
Kendall, thank you very much for that quick update. Of course, Dr. Molemela is being laid to rest now as we speak. Let's go over now to Phil Hawkins, who's standing by with some weather. Hopefully no more tremors.
Yeah, thank you very much, and very good morning. Well, let's take a look at your weather. First of all, we're going to start off in South Africa's northeastern areas. Here we're seeing just partly cloudy skies, and we are going to see a little bit of rainfall coming in towards the eastern interior, especially around the region nearest to the borders in the interior of KZN. Now, by tomorrow, what we'll see is that rainfall intensifies along that southwestern and southeastern coastline here. We're going to see showers and thunder showers generally forecast for the area as well. There, showers and thunder showers forecast throughout Central Africa as well for today. Most of it just isolated showers, so not a particularly rainy day, really. Let's take a look at what's happening in terms of your temperatures. Well, Cape Town's going to be a little bit rainy for today. Now, it should only be morning rainfall and it shouldn't last too long whatsoever. PE going to peak at about 29 degrees, Durban 31. We're going to see a lot of higher level cloud cover around South Africa in general, but a lot of this is not going to yield any rainfall whatsoever, and we're still going to see a lot of sunshine. Pretoria is at 31 degrees for today, and Johannesburg at about 30. Temperatures in Gaborone at 32 degrees. Well, we're seeing sunny skies continuing all the way through to Windhoek with a 28-degree maximum. A hot day continuing as we move further north. Bulawayo is at 28 degrees, but we're going to see quite a bit of sunshine there. Well, the sunshine stops. We're going to see a lot of cloud cover and rainfall, of course, forecast all the way from Luanda there towards the Yaoundé area. And, of course, this area is going to expect most of the rainfall for today. Bangui is at 37 degrees with showers and thunder showers. Juba 38. The rainfall at the moment not quite reaching around Mogadishu and Nairobi and surrounding areas, but we might just see some very isolated storms just moving past, as you can see from today into tomorrow there. In general, very, very similar conditions, although by tomorrow we're going to see Côte d'Ivoire expecting a little bit more rainfall. Other than that, as we said, very, very similar conditions here, seeing very isolated storms around Ethiopia, Somalia and surrounding areas as well. The Sahara remaining very, very dry, but no surprises there as usual. Let's take a look now at what we can expect in terms of your temperatures. Well, we're seeing a very warm day there in Al Fajr, about 38 degrees Celsius, Khartoum 39. Temperatures along the northern coastline, well, not even close. 25 degrees in Cairo and 24 in Tripoli. Tunis is at 19 degrees, and it's one of the only areas in North Africa expecting some rainfall for today. It's only going to be isolated showers, but nonetheless, that's what we're expecting there. Slightly warmer conditions behind a higher pressure system around Las Palmas and Rabat, but only at a 22-degree maximum. It's not warm, not particularly hot by any standards there. This is where we're going to leave your weather for now, but do stay tuned with SABC News. Don't hesitate to contact us. Email weather@sabc.co.za or give us a call, 011-714-5077. That's it from me. Have yourself a great day.
President Jacob Zuma says that the country's security agencies will seek new and more effective ways to fight crime.
Crime, as you would appreciate, depends on the circumstances. This narrative that South Africans are xenophobic, we don't necessarily agree with it.
This group of Bangladeshi shop owners ooze frustration. They've lost everything.
I'm like totally destroyed. I can't see away what I'll do, where I'll go.
Rescue workers are still searching for the body of a 5-year-old boy who fell into an old mine shaft near Boksburg in Ekurhuleni.
Tensions remain high, with thousands of community members refusing to clear the scene until the boy is found.
Yeah, you're back with us here on the Newsroom Show. Very good morning. If you've just joined us, it's 10 a.m. Central African time as we continue this rolling broadcast of the news and current affairs and what's in the news. I'm with Kendall Mahamate. Morning again, Kendall.
A very interesting topic you've got going today. I think a lot of people will be dialing in to just see what it is that's being said on it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things. Racial polarization obviously comes out of this. But first up, of course, we've had a ratings downgrade and the jitters and the fallout continues. We'll be back at the JSE shortly to get an update. But we ask you, what do you make of the ratings downgrade? Well, you guys are tweeting us and you are not afraid to give us a view. I can tell you so much. This one comes from Jubilee. What criteria do they use for the downgrade? Yes, that is a fair question that, well, many are asking.
Mzolisi comes in with junk stasis. It's not the country, but our economy that's been declared as such. That can be reversed by the nation united.
Says Mzolisi. Jubilee comes back. So they judge Gigaba's performance over a period of 1 weekend. Shocking. Says, yes, they talk about uncertainty. Of course, all the buzzwords that you will hear.
And Lawrence Segulu says the same rating agencies could not predict the 2008 financial crisis. Someone, perhaps Zuma, should rate these credit agencies.
Lawrence, they were fined in 2008 for colluding to not see that crisis. Yeah. Mzolisi comes back and he says current developments are an inspiration to all. South Africans in particular must awake some activism and activist spirit, says Mzolisi. A fight for the good of the country. That's what we call it. Of course, we're also running a poll today with one of the issues that divides South Africans. It's the race label. It's called coloured. Yes, it's the only country on the planet that still uses this term, coloured. And you guys are voting us and we're asking you, should we just have it dropped officially off our documentations first, and secondly, out of the conversation completely? Kendall, we've got 228 votes in.
And what's very interesting is there's no clear cut. Well, look, there is a majority, yes, 57% versus 43 saying no, but it's not clear cut. I thought it would be much bigger, 80.
I like to race label others in South Africa. It's possible. Yeah. Blessing Chokera says they are just colours. Nothing can change. It's naturally. Blessing, that's a shocker. That's a shocker, my dear.
Well, LGN says, let's see if this will water that one down. LGN says, coloured people are proof that any label is in. Keep the label to destroy all race labels.
Says, hell no. Being proud coloured makes me proudly South African. So that means we labels in SA and all are called Africans. Maybe that's the way forward.
SABC Newsroom raise their history by just calling them black. They have their own culture too, just like you.
It's tough. And this one from Louis Corky says, interesting views. Interesting views. We're going to have that conversation, but before we get there, we've got a lot of news to do because things are as we speak. Let's get straight into our work with our top stories, Kendall. Moody's Investor Service AA2 rating on review for a further. President Jacob Zuma is set to face in an shuffle. And the state of southern town of Mokoa after almost 300 people were killed in mudslides there. That's the top stories right now. Let's go over to Kendall for the sports headlines.
Eben, thank you very much. Good morning to you. Besides everything else that's going on around the world, we also have a little bit of sports for you. And this is what we've got planned for this bulletin.
Yes, say that once more. Chance for Jair! Surely a hat-trick, yes, a hat-trick!
Cape Town City FC crushed Chipa United 4-1, shooting to the top of the log on the back of Bongolwetu Jair's hat-trick, the fastest ever in PSL history.
We owe FIFA lots of money. There are players that could not be paid. They are signing on fees.
And recently relegated Morocco. Also, Cape Town takes construction giants WBHO to court for price fixing during the construction of the World Cup stadiums and wins. All this and more in more detail we'll have for you at 10:40. But for now, do stay with Eben because he's got the news.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kendall. Very good morning to you, wherever you are. Now, this is our top story. Moody's Investor Services placed government's Baa2 rating on review for downgrade now. The move is likely to further shake investor confidence. It is prompted by the abrupt change in leadership of key government institutions and comes after Standard & Poor's downgraded South Africa to junk status.
After Standard & Poor's earlier decision to cut the country's credit rating to junk status, all eyes were on whether the other two global ratings agencies, Fitch and Moody's, would follow suit. What Moody's has done by issuing this statement is to put the government on notice that they are initiating a review for downgrade over the cabinet reshuffle, but also because it raises concerns about the future effectiveness of the country's policy-making institutions and the immediate implications for growth and public debt. The statement says the review will allow Moody's to assess these risks and whether the changes in leadership signal a weakening in the country's institutional, economic and fiscal strength. The review will also explore the implications of the underlying political dynamics which led to the changes in ministerial appointments for the predictability of South Africa's institutional framework, including the government's capacity to conduct sound economic policies which foster economic and fiscal strength. Its decision, Standard & Poor's said internal government and party divisions could delay fiscal and structural reforms and potentially erode the trust that had been established between business leaders and Labour. Sherman Brycepe's SABC News, New York.
Well, let's now go back to our reporter, Nompumelelo Ziziba. She's at the JSC, joined by economist Mike Schussler this morning. A very good morning to you, Nompu. Before you get into your work with the interview there, just give us a quick roundup. What's the last hour been like?
Thanks very much, Eben. Well, what we've seen on the JSC is that the equities market, the all-share index, is in positive territory. That's largely being buoyed by the mining counters, which have, at some point, they were up by as much as 2% or just over. And this will be a product of the weaker rand. The rand is weaker. It's down by over 1% today, hovering around just under 14 rand against the dollar, or 13.90 against the dollar to be precise. And it's around 17 against the UK pound at the moment. So the rand really taking a beating. People have been selling out of our South African government bonds. And obviously this is a direct result of us being downgraded to junk status. And as you mentioned, with Moody's also indicating that we're likely to also be downgraded by them, it's not looking good. And so now I have Mike Schussler, who's the Executive Director of economist.co.za, with me here just to break down what he sees as the economic implications of this status that we now have to endure. Thanks very much for joining us, Mike.
Thank you, Nampo.
Good stuff. Now, we've been downgraded to junk status by Standard & Poor's. So when will the ordinary South African begin to feel the effect of this decision?
Well, I think we're going to feel the effect pretty quickly, mainly through the fuel price, first of all, because that's the price that adjusts the quickest. And we're unlikely to see another decrease in the price of fuel. We're likely to see that increase. We'll obviously paraffin and gas, and that goes with it. But I think where it's also going to make a difference is in the food prices, like the maize market here. The futures market's probably already up. So that's going to impact us on the price side. Where I do think it's impacting on us in more than one way is that the South African economy has been unable to create jobs. And that is not going to change, but it's going to maybe get a little bit worse. And that is the problem, because we're not going to create the jobs for the kids coming out of school and university and things like that. We're seeing higher and higher unemployment rates. We're not bringing that down. So that also has an impact. And I think where we also probably see it is in our wealth, with other words, our pensions and the like, and the fact that our house prices are unlikely to go up much in these sort of circumstances because interest rates cannot come down. So, yes, the most immediate one is probably petrol, but all the others obviously also follow.
So one of the things obviously that happens is that people come out of South African bonds, or at least they ask for a higher premium if they're to buy our bonds. So we have to pay more to get debt, right? But what I wanted to ask you about the equity side, they're positive at the moment, but in the long run, surely they will also turn negative because you're going to have inflation creeping in as well.
Yes, that's very true. But the other thing is we must remember, if inflation is higher, you need higher equity prices to make up for that. And I'm not sure how much our equity prices will beat inflation. Over the last 3 or 4 years, it's been very flat for our equity market. If we can just talk about how it affects ordinary South Africans as well, because I think what we've also got to realize is when government pays more for its debt, it has less money to pay for education or medicine in the hospitals or for its own staff, and specifically also on the welfare side. So our social security increases are also likely to be less than inflation next year. And this year we were lucky because those people got very close to inflation increases. But where it's also impacting, obviously, is the taxpayer. His increases were higher than inflation from paying tax to make up that shortfall. Now, you cannot carry on with that forever, and it's going to become very difficult for us to give the sort of 6% increases to the old age grants, the child grants, and the like. And at the same time, we're going to have to find ways how to make things work in the hospitals, for example, more efficiently. Education is going to have to get more efficient because it's difficult to see how we're going to get the money to pay for everything. And already we're seeing, because of the cash crunch that government is facing, fewer people in the defence force, for example. That also probably means that the police are going to have less petrol to drive around and patrol our streets.
These are very worrying insights that you're giving us. But, on the other hand, you have ordinary South Africans tweeting there asking, what criteria do people use, do the ratings agencies use to downgrade us, or, and also the fact that they missed the 2008 subprime crisis and all of that. What are your thoughts in that regard?
Okay, if I can start the long way around, the subprime crisis that they missed meant that they had to tighten their criteria, which is now coming back to haunt some countries like South Africa. So they have to be a bit more on the ball. They have to pull the trigger very much, I wouldn't say earlier, but they have to be on the ball. The second thing, and I think it's the most important thing to realize, the rating agencies do not work for us or our government. They work independently, and their stuff is bought and adhered to by pension funds, asset managers, and the like. We may pay for it to get part of that rating agency, but if people think it's just one rating agency or 3, there's more than 10 rating agencies in the world, all of which who rate South Africa. Not all of them do, but all those that do rate South Africa have been downgrading us in the last while. Now, there's several factors. First of all, South Africans have been getting poorer in relative terms to the rest of the world. And in absolute terms, in the last 3 years, the South African growth rate has not beaten the population rate. So that's the most important criteria. The second one is how much debt to GDP do you have for your government, and can your government pay it back? What are the risk factors with that? And that is obviously becoming a risk factor because we also guarantee, whilst Pravin Gordhan did the right thing and said state debt is not going to increase anymore, the fact is that Eskom and, for example, the SAA and so on are likely to have further debt, and we guarantee a large part of that. So the rating agencies are looking at this aspect as well. And then a smaller part, but as important, is how believable are we? And with the politics at play right now, where a finance minister was talking to these rating agencies, or the big three at least, and he gets pulled back and called back by the president of the country and then replaced, how believable are we? And under those sort of circumstances, you've got to think of people looking after other people's money in pension funds, in unit trusts, all around the world, and this is huge flows of money, and they want to know what the risks are here. And many of those pension funds have, let's put it this way, automatic things in place where if a country is now rated as junk status, you cannot, say, put more than 1% in. When it's just above junk status, you cannot put more than 5% in. But if it's a AAA rated country, you can put all your money in there. Obviously, no pension fund puts all its money in one place, but ultimately, those are the sort of criteria that would be in place that investment managers of those companies would have to adhere to. And that's their board of trustees or their governance or whatever puts those criteria in place. And when we get downgraded, that is where the difference comes in, because those guys have rules to adhere to.
Understood, Mike. Well, we're going to leave it there. We've run out of time, but thank you very much for your insights. Well, Eben, you heard what Mike Schuessler had to say. Not a pretty picture for the South African consumer going forward. And with other ratings agencies likely to downgrade us in the next few days, well, the prospects are not looking very good. We'll have more for you a little bit later, but it's back to studio.
Thanks, Nompo. Nompo is live at the JSE for the whole day. Buckle up, she says. Fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Yeah, that's where we're heading for the at least medium term to longer term here in South Africa. Now, of course, we've been asking you to respond to us. What are you thinking? What are you tweeting us? Ratings downgrade first. What do you guys? Is it an elaborate hoax? Some says. Well, Zwelihle Konene says these credit rating agencies will find billions in the USA due to their collusion. They are criminals, says Zwelihle. Yes, there's a train of thought that believes this. Then Collins Ntelele says, Newsroom, what can we say? Because now we are being told how corrupt S&P is. Yes, they were found guilty. That is true. That is true indeed. So tweet us on that one. Of course, we're dealing with another one. We're dealing about colored, some say mentality, others say colored identity. We're talking about that at length as well. We've been running a poll. So we're asking you on the poll, should the race label colored, should it be dropped in South Africa? Let's just get rid of it. It's unnecessary. It causes a lot of pain and discomfort. 240 of you have voted. 57% say yes, drop this race label. Drop it. We don't need race labeling in South Africa. Yeah, if you're Griqua, you're Griqua. If you're Hesekwa, you're Hesekwa. You know, if you, half Indian, Chara, as they call me, just accept it. Let's move on. But let's not pigeonhole and box people in. Now, let's get serious a little bit. The establishment of the first indigenous and Aboriginal Khoe and San nation of Southern Africa, the constitution and quest for self-determination in government is history in the making, they say. Now, to talk to us concerning the concept of the united Khoe and San people having their own land to govern themselves, well, we are joined by Greg Fick. He spoke to us a little bit earlier. He's the interim administrator of the united Khoe and San nation of Southern Africa, the UK and SA, and chairperson of the National Acting Committee, SANAC. He's in Cape Town. Very good morning to you once again, Greg. Greg, thanks for being with us here on Newsroom.
Morning, Evan, and it's good to be here with the viewers.
Greg, just expand to us on this concept of the united Khoe and San nation of Southern Africa.
Evan, we have full knowledge of the so-called colored people, and it's a fact that the so-called colored people are the direct descendants from the Khoe and San nation of Southern Africa. Now, when I speak of Southern Africa, it's very important that you understand that South Africa is a sovereign state within the borders of Southern Africa, which is our land. Our forefathers is here. The rock art that you find all over Southern Africa is legitimate proof of our existence. Now, we as a nation need to understand that we need to get together. And this is what I am doing currently. We are going from city to city, community to community, to educate our people why we want this colored classification scrapped completely out of the history books of South Africa. This government has been discriminating against us, and we as a people need to come together. The United Khoe and San nation is here, and we are not going anywhere. We were found here first, and we will stay here. This land is our land. We do not need to fight for this land. We just need to get our land back. That's all we want. And for the viewers outside, yes, they are Griquas, they are Namas, they are Koranas, they are the Bushmen, and they are the so-called mixed race. What we are saying as a nation is that all these tribes forms part of our nation. Many want to know what are we going to do with the mix, the people so-called that were mixed with the so-called white classification tribes and the so-called black classification tribes. Now, the whites are referred to as Europeans, the blacks are referred to, or rightfully referred to as Nguni tribes. These people all came to find us here in our country and in our land. The Europeans came from the waters, the Ngunis came traveling from the north towards the south. That is a fact. We as a nation want our self-determination. We've not been included in the Constitution of South Africa. That is proven and it's a fact. Kwadesa, we were excluded. Nobody asked us concerning ourselves. The government of today want the people outside South Africa to believe that we are extinct. But here I am, a descendant from the Khoe and San. So are many other so-called colored people.
People to ask me, what do we call the new, what will be the new term? Because in the South African paradigm, we only understand race labeling. So they need a new term, a new label. How are you going to in South Africa? And tell us about your move to have this, this race label scrapped.
Even there is no such a thing as class upon us. The so-called white classification is something that someone thought out of his head because he wanted to have dominion over another. The so-called black classification, these are all man-made. But we cannot ask for another term. The law in 1950, Article 30 of the South African apartheid regime, make it very clear that the so-called colored people were classified as colored because they have now removed the name from the Khoe and San to the classification colored. So if I just reverse it back, we are what we are. We cannot determine to be called any other name. We are Khoe and we are San.
Yeah.
So what must I now do? I can either accept what God has divinely called us to be, or I must accept what man. Tomorrow somebody can classify us as pigs. Must we now accept that?
Yes.
Yes, there are people, so-called colored people, that have accepted. We do not have a problem with that. We understand that everyone having its own time must be educated. The current government that is democratically elected has done absolutely nothing to help our people to find their true identity. Instead, they have used that, the ignorance of our people, against us, to discriminate against our nation and to take what belongs to our nation.
Greg, quickly tell me, you've got 2 minutes to wrap it up for me. But you guys are busy with now. And why do you need this unification? Why is this nation so fractured and so divided?
Even let me first say, our nation, there is not united as such. But so is the Nguni nation. As we look at the ANC and the problems that they have, it's a racial problem that they have. It's tribal problems that they have. So why should we now be called or negatively approached? Our nation is busy building itself. Our nation is united. If those people that say we are not united is because they are standing outside. We will continue to build our nation. We will continue to educate our people because the word colored simply mean in Afrikaans, jy's 'n gemors, jy's nie 'n mens nie, jy's nie 'n volk nie, jy het geen menswaardigheid nie. I am not that. I am not a piece of rubbish. I am not a animal or worse than an animal. I am a human being, and we as human beings will continue to fight to be regarded as human beings and be equally treated. The nation of the Khoe and San people are coming together. We are as sovereign as the sovereign state of South Africa. And in our sovereignty, we demand to have our self-determination and governance, which is also inscribed in the Constitution of South Africa. If we desire it, why can we not have it? The situation is not the fact that they don't want to recognize us as First Nation, it's the fact that they know if they do give us the recognition of First Nation status, the land must be returned back to the people of the land. And that people is the Khoe and San.
Greg, thank you very much for joining. Administrator of the United Khoe and San Nation of South Africa, giving his views on, well, a whole variety of issues around the coloured identity. Thank you once again, Greg, for coming to us live from Cape Town. That is. Now, of course, you guys are tweeting us on this thing. Let's take a look at what you are tweeting us now. What you're telling us with regards to the issue of identity, coloured identity. It goes as deep as land. Yes, some say it's all about the land at the end of the day. Connor Natso says, Newsroom, yes, labelling has fractured us as Africans. We must get rid of this psychological oppression. Who came up with these names? IH, you're right on point there. Who named us? Rooks says, Newsroom, we are coloured. Who are we? Why must our identity change? Well, because this identity stems from oppression, some are saying to you. It was a name you were given. Dipansu says, Newsroom, apartheid really did a number on us. For us to be discussing divisions it made amongst us. Sad, yes, Dipansu, sad but true. That's what it is. Tulani says, Newsroom coloured name is not good. We are all South Africans. Racism in our time. Let it be removed from the statute books, says Tulani. Sobering view from Tulani there. Rooks comes back and says, being coloured is not peer pressure. We were made unique and awesome. Yes, Rooks. There we go. Well, this is where we are. Hey, keep watching and we'll keep talking and we'll keep putting difficult concepts forward, because here in South Africa, it's about what we do with it and how we come to terms with this. Anyhow, time now to step up proceedings. President Jacob Zuma is set to face one of the ANC's top structures in an extended National Working Committee meeting a little bit later today, they say. Now, dissent within his own party following last week's cabinet reshuffle. The top six met the president yesterday to ventilate their concerns, they say. Some publicly criticized the changes to his executive, including the hiring, or the firing rather, of the finance minister. Now, one of the ANC's alliance partners, COSATU, has now also placed the president's resignation on the table. This while the Communist Party has already resolved that the president must go.
Which is a huge achievement.
Many are calling it the president's precipice.
Those issues must come back openly to the...
Having to quell dissent in his own party.
And I undertake to hold...
over changes to his cabinet. His first point of call, the meeting with officials.
The past few days have been very difficult for the ANC, and I think they've been difficult too for the country. Officials have requested more time to clarify themselves. As you're aware that you quoted, some officials went into public about the statement. They must give guidance, including to the NWC, so that the NWC does not just sit, but will take cue in terms of leadership from the officials. Now, the extended NWC is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon at 2. Extended NWC will include chairpersons and secretaries of provinces.
And collective leadership.
While some in the ANC lambasted the three top six for criticizing the president.
It has nothing to do with the merits and demerits of the reshuffle, but it's a build-up towards this upcoming national conference of the ANC. And it's a build-up to discredit not only the sitting president of the ANC. President Zuma is not coming back. It's known, he's on record saying that.
Meanwhile, COSATU has put the recent developments in the country on the agenda of its Central Executive Committee.
It is the first time in the history of the ANC being in government that President has reshuffled the cabinet without telling us or consulting us in that particular view. That in itself robbed us the opportunity to ask the President, because if he has called us and said, I want to remove this minister and all those things, we'll have asked him in good faith, why, President, are you changing these particular people?
Some analysts say it will be tough for the ANC to rise above this latest debacle.
The President has this prerogative to fire and hire. At the same time, that decision has got to be exercised, or that right has got to be exercised in a way that does not bring harm to the interest of the Republic. That's what the Constitution says. So in this case, the question is this decision in the interest of the Republic? And the chorus out there is that, no, it is not.
But the question remains, will the ANC emerge more divided or unified? Criselda Lewis, SABC News, in Johannesburg.
Moving abroad now, at least 10 people killed in St. Petersburg, Russia, in a train explosion, where a further 39 were also wounded yesterday. President Vladimir Putin has called the attack a possible act of terror.
Officials confirmed a second unexploded device was found at another station and deactivated. Initial reports suggest there had been 2 explosions, but it was later confirmed that there was a single blast on one train between 2 stations. Meanwhile, European Union foreign ministers have expressed their concerns.
Our condolences go to all Russian people, and in particular those who lost their loved ones. And we continue to follow the news coming from St. Petersburg with a lot of apprehension.
We don't yet know exactly what is behind this or who's responsible for this outrage, but clearly our thoughts are very much today with the families of the victims and with the people of St. Petersburg, just as a few days ago they were with the people of London.
I'm horrified by reports from St. Petersburg that several people have been killed and many injured.
a little bit, move away from politics a little bit, yes. Outside the Lines, that's where we're going. Yes, it's a novel. It's called Outside the Lines, and it's Amira Patel's first novel, and it tells a story of two women. Kathleen, a troubled young woman living in the northern suburbs of Johannesburg, obviously quite privileged, and Flora, who's a domestic worker at Kathleen's house. Now, Kathleen disappears, and tension and drama ensues. Now, to talk to us about the book and about writing in general, I'm joined in the studio this morning by Amira Patel. Good morning, Amira. Nice to be with you.
Good morning. Thank you.
Amira, tell me a little bit, before we get into you, tell us about Outside the Lines. What was the inspiration for the title, for instance, and the storyline?
So the title really came from the idea that, I mean, your poll, that, you know, it's about identity, it's about being blocked and boxed in. And what the story kind of does is it follows 5 different characters who each have their own identities or ways that we would like, boxes that we'd like them to fit into.
Yeah.
And it's, what I like is to allow the characters to sort of bleed outside of these lines, to kind of, even in their relationships where the crossover happens, how in our society you have to children who are very privileged.
Yeah.
But that line is a sticky one when it comes to discipline or when it comes to actual power.
So it's a book that delves into sort of contemporary South Africa, all the kind of stereotypes we have, domestic workers, the madam, the northern suburbs, all those kind of things. But I see you've got 5 main characters that kind of connects it all together, is it?
Yes, yeah. So it's got Flora, who you spoke of, and Kathleen, and then also Kathleen's father, who is a father who's there, but he's quite distant. He doesn't really look after his children. And then Farhana, who is a young girl in Lens, and she's dating Flora's son, Zilindile.
Yeah, it's a very South African story with a father not being there and so forth. And we always like to racially profile that kind of thing in South Africa. I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad you didn't racially profile that. That's fantastic. It's set in Johannesburg, northern suburbs, of course. That comes with its own stereotypes.
Yes.
But tell me about Johannesburg readers. People have an appetite to read about Johannesburg and to see art about Johannesburg, and people buy stuff about Johannesburg now, don't they?
I think it's an exciting place. I think that it's our New York. So much happens here.
Yeah.
If you look at the politics, I don't think any writer has written fiction that's more exciting than what's happening at the moment. And so it's a city where a lot is happening. It's got a pulse, it's got a vibe. It's also dangerous.
Yeah, that's what I like about the city. It's got that kind of fatalistic edge. I don't know, it talks to me because maybe I'm a bit fatalistic in the end. But you have a little bit of history yourself. You're a stage and TV actor, formerly.
Still am. Yeah.
Still. So how does that kind of connect with the kind of writing that you do? Does it mean you're going to become a director soon?
No. I think what I like to do is I like to tell stories.
Yeah.
And from whatever different angle I can. So in terms of the acting, I think what it gave me as an author is that it allows me to sit in the shoes of each character when writing them.
And the influences, stage influences in your writing at all? Is there an influence, and what would that influence be if you had to put it into words?
Well, I think sort of what writing does that acting doesn't is that you are completely powerful as the author of a novel. You're the set designer, you're the costume designer, you're the director, you're the actor, you're all of it. Whereas when you're acting in a play or on TV, you are simply telling the story from a single role.
Now, fiction is quite difficult to write. I mean, I fancy myself as a writer as well. Fiction is quite difficult to write, and it's quite disciplined. You have to be quite disciplined with your characters. You have to be quite disciplined to not always run off on a tangent, as it were. It's your first book. Tell me about technically how difficult you found it and the transition that you've made.
I think that my stage and sort of theatre and drama background helped, because I think I have a good understanding of story and journey and and following that through. But I also, this book is a product of a master's. So I had a lot of help. I had supervisors. I was studying, so I was assisted in many ways.
Okay, you had a bit of guidance. Let's call it that. Which one do you enjoy more, being on stage or being behind and kind of manipulating the story as you do as a writer?
Tough one. I think both of them offer me something completely different. I don't want to give either of them up.
And next for you, Amira Patel, you're a young mom.
Yes.
What are your hopes and dreams, and what do you want to do in the next 10 years in both spaces, I would think?
I don't know, just do more of what I'm doing. I suppose I'm quite happy. So write more, act more, tell more interesting stories.
And if we could get people, if people wanted to kind of be involved, go online, and get involved with you a little bit, do you have a Facebook page that they can interact with you? Where do they buy the book, for instance? How do you make it available? All those kind of housekeeping stuff.
Yeah, at exclusive books and online through Amazon and many other online sources. And I'm on Facebook as Amira Patel. I'm on Twitter at Amira Patel, Instagram.
Well, Amira, that's fantastic. It looks like a great book. I'm going to ask you to autograph it for me, and I'm going to hang on to this one, because I really would like to read it. It sounds like an interesting Joburg story. Yes, it's a Joburg story. It's called Outside the Lines, and it kind of deals with all the Johannesburg, northern suburbs, and the like. The author is Amira Patel. Thank you for being with us today, Amira. Something a little bit different. Break, guys. Yeah, we'll pay the bills, and when we come back, hopefully the president will be ready to talk. See you now.
Now, this is Trends, of course, your one-stop serving of all that's juicy and trending in the world of entertainment and showbiz.
And this is Health Talk.
A very good morning and welcome to Media Monitor. I'm your host, Alicia Jolly.
My name is Dumila Matters.
What time? Question time.
For your daily dose of current affairs, tune in to the SABC News Channel.
Technology is all around us and some can't live without it.
There's also the problem of internet connectivity.
I was speaking to a robot.
It also makes a few governments panic, and therefore they block the internet from time to time.
They just banned the internet, which is the source of my livelihood.
For African Technology Network, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time.
Welcome back. My name is Kendall Makhamate. A very interesting chat that Eben just had with regards to that book, something about lines, and I think it's very apt today. Good morning to you. First up on our stories, we'll talk about development soccer. And we'll talk about development soccer when we bring in our Black Aces and the under-13 team. But before we go there, let's talk about Cape Town City FC, who are back at the top of the Absolute Premiership log after beating Chipa United 4-1 in the mother city last night. Bongolwetu Jaiya completed a hat-trick in 10 minutes before Tamsang Mkize made it 4-0 at the stroke of half-time. Chipa are 10th in the standings with 23 points from 22 matches.
Here's Jaiya now, batting with Marco. Jaiya in the back of the net.
Jaiya did not need a second invitation after being put through by Lihlohonolo Majoro 6 minutes into the match as he opened City's account. Opringoma and Lebuhang Manyama's combination on the left flank made things easy for Jaiya to extend his team's lead.
Across Jaiya, number 2. Superbly done.
The Eastern Cape-based side was still trying to come to terms with what had just minutes of the match completed his hat-trick.
Hat-trick. Jair with 3 goals in 15 minutes. What a start.
Chipper tried to unlock City's defense as they interchanged passes in their opponent's half. Schwayeb Walters made a fine at the other end. Made it 4-0 to City at the stroke of half-time.
It's number 4, simply done on the stroke of half-time.
And 15 minutes before time, Rulani Manzini scored a consolation goal for the visitors. The match finished 4-1 to Cape Town City, summit of the lock, with 42 matches.
At half-time, off what we done in the first half, and that we needed to keep a clean sheet, which we ended up not keeping, you know. No, but still, second half we could have maybe wrapped it up, maybe 2 or 3 goals also in the second half, and it would have been
the one thing that I'm not so pleased to come back. We had a chance to come back in the first half. We had a chance to come back. We had a chance to score. It's just that there was not enough effort put into, you know, the realization that we are goals behind and we need to take risks.
In their next host Polokwane City on Tuesday, will be away next week Wednesday. SABC.
Now, as promised, the Black Aces under 13. Last year's performance when they travelled to the 2017 Mundial season last year, Aces finished 6th in a tournament which consisted of 80 teams from more than 50 countries, including the likes of Barcelona as well as Real Madrid. The team will leave the country on Wednesday with their first match of the tournament on the 19th of this month.
Aces' performance in last year's tournament is a clear indication that in the early stages, South African players' technical skills are on par with that of international players. However, the problem seems to be lying in the tactical aspect of the game, especially in the later stages of football development. Local players' understanding of their roles and responsibilities in the game cannot be compared with their South American counterparts. Aces Academy head coach Mitch Stevenson used the recent Under-17 Gauteng Champions tournament to highlight the gap between our local players and international players. The tournament was won by Atletico Madrid for the second time in the running, brushing aside the likes of Bidvest Wits 5-2 in the semi-finals. Stevenson maintained that part of the solution to the problems facing South African football lies in professionalizing football development in the country.
It has to start at the top, you know. They say start at grassroots levels. There's thousands of kids playing soccer and dozens of coaches trying to do their individual thing. But a lot of them are doing it without funding, they're doing it without facilities, they're doing it without training, and the kids come there without equipment. And again, they don't really have a good idea of what their potential is and what the desired level needs to be. A lot of the guys operate way under the level.
Black Aces Academy Director Tony Diaz echoed his colleagues' sentiments, calling for mass professionalization of football development in South Africa, especially in areas such as coaching. However, he was quick to concede it's not all doom and gloom for South African football.
From my side, I think the biggest problem that we have, or the biggest challenge that we have, is the level of coaching. You know, we need to improve the level of coaches. I always say, before you develop the player, you've got to develop the coach. And I think that's an area that we need to focus on. So we need to focus on getting our coaches better, because if our coaches are better, they're going to be able to instill better principles and better ideas and teach the boys better. So I think that's where the challenge comes in. And I think SAF has done a lot of good work in growing the coaches. A lot of coaches are getting a lot more qualified coaches now than they were in the past, but I still think we're behind.
A lot still needs to be done as far as football development is concerned in the country, but with academies such as Black Aces, SuperSport United and Bidvest Wits in operation, albeit on limited resources, there's hope for the future.
Mitch isn't also do something wrong, and then Coach Perry's helping us with our fitness and all of that, so yeah, very good.
I want to see myself playing in the big teams. I want to see myself playing in Barcelona, Real Madrid, Chelsea.
Due to the culture of professional and televised sports which young and aspiring professional footballers are exposed to, it has become increasingly difficult for soccer academies to strike a perfect balance between winning and the development of players. However, at Aces, winning is not everything, but wanting to win is. Thus, heading into this tournament, the academy will attempt to go all the way, and in the process of trying to win, the players will be presented with the opportunity to hone their skills. Joseph Mohali, SABC News.
Now, the city of Cape Town has welcomed a High Court ruling against construction companies which colluded in the building of the Cape Town Stadium. One of 7 implicated companies, construction giant WBHO, had challenged the city's legal bid. But the North Gauteng High Court found that it had, in fact, colluded with other construction companies, robbing municipalities of 112 billion rands during the construction of the World Cup stadiums. The ruling paves the way for the city to reclaim more than 500 million rands in damages.
The construction of the Cape Town Stadium kicked off in March, 2 years to complete, and came with a hefty price tag. More than 4 billion rand was spent on this stadium alone. More than 10 years later, the city is looking to reclaim the millions lost in the construction deal.
The construction industry tried to delay the case by saying to go to court. The victory of last week from the court said that the city of Cape Town, we are within our right to proceed to claim back the 500 million rand, and the court gave the construction companies 15 days to file their responding papers.
Delil has also raised concerns about the stadium being unprofitable.
What we have done in the city of Cape Town is to establish a municipal entity that is now going to manage the stadium to make it profitable. We have already commercialized 2 of the floors of the stadium to start talking about getting an anchor tenant there.
7 listed construction companies found to be part of the collusion corruption have agreed to contribute 1.5 billion rand to help transform the construction industry in the next 2 weeks. Carmel Locomotive, SABC News, Cape Town.
I'll have you know that 112 billion rand is 10% of what SARS has just announced they collected for the fiscus from taxpayers in 2016-2017. It's a lot of money. Now, the Springbok squad is currently having their second of 3 scheduled camps in Stellenbosch. Springbok coach Alistair Coetzee says he's happy to have defenders on board with the experience that he brings. Coetzee is also casting the net wide before the Boks take on France in a 3-match series in June.
Emphasise the importance of the camps to work on attacking and defensive strategies and to communicate with the players on a one-on-one basis before they take on the French.
We look at the conditioning of the players because there is a national conditioning strategy at the moment, and it's quite notable that the level of intensity at which Super Rugby is played, the physicality last weekend's game between the Lions and the Sharks just show that.
Young players such as fly-off Kerwin Bosch and centre Evia Fulyun were included, but Coetzee stressed that other players in form could still force their way into contention.
I am aware of guys who are playing well, like Espie Marais, a guy like Cornel Skusan, but I know also Dylan Lates have been playing outstanding rugby.
13 players from the Sharks, 10 from the Lions, 8 from the Cheetahs were called up for the camp. The Bulls and Southern Kings players were not considered as they are abroad. Craig Murray, SABC News, Stellenbosch.
Now staying with Johan Ackerman is expecting that the experience he'll gain overseas will help South African rugby in the future. Ackerman moves to the English club Gloucester at the end of the Lions Super Rugby campaign. Ackerman and his players achieved a lot during their time together. Restoring the pride amongst Lions supporters was right up there. In the end, he decided to improve his skills. A decision on his replacement will only be made later in the season. And that's definitely not one of the legacies he's left for the Lions. That was a Sharks try, scoring against a little bit of a porous Lions defense. I'll tell you what, in the next the Lions really are. That's where we leave it for now. We'll be back at the top of the hour with more news. You're watching Newsroom.
sometimes
This might look like trucks carrying. This is a gold mine. Their work involves waiting for trucks that have offloaded steel so they can grab the little that is
to take the space.
in their quest to put food on their tables. They put their lives in danger.
It's Tuesday, the 4th of April. But this day, it's not April Fool's Day, but it's the 4th of April, but it's a day for a downgrade. Today, we focus on that. Ratings agency Standard & Poor's downgraded South Africa to junk status. That was prompted by the abrupt change in leadership of the Treasury, Kendall. So we're asking our viewers the question.
100%. It's exactly about that. We're asking you, what do you make of the ratings downgrade that South Africa has now suffered?
So that's the question we posed to you. Let's take a look at what you have to say with regards to that, and all your comments on the Twitter handle as well as on the Facebook page.
Jacob Piri comes in with, this downgrade has nothing to do with cabinet reshuffle. S&P confused people by telling it out just after the cabinet reshuffle.
Yeah.
I
So
beg
says
to differ.
Jacob continues, says, it seems to me that S&P downgraded before the cabinet reshuffle. This is her. Well, Jacob is there.
Ntanzama Nana says, it's clear that this has more impact on white monopoly who join in to assist better life to the poor people in squatter camps. I think it affects everybody.
This one, it is funny how it's the ratings agency. But our President of the National Congress have caused out downgrade by S&P, says Danny Lombard.
Jaden Bango comes in, these goons are not serious.
Well, these are some of your comments, and you can keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue today. But we're also conducting a poll on the leaders of the Khoe and San and its descendants that want the term coloured scrapped from the South African racial vocabulary and our official documents. So, Kendall, we're asking...
Yeah, we're asking the question, should the race be dropped in South Africa?
Well, so far, 260 votes in 21 hours left to vote. Are saying yes, but there's a big cohort, almost 43%, that says no, you can't drop it. So the question is why?
And different reasons come up. One of them being Ms. Lisa Titus, young people. The term coloured gives them that. We need to relook at the connotation of the term.
What about First Nation, perhaps, Melissa? Tawanda says there is no coloured race, but a dominant gene on your...
Ololo says, let's follow the USA. There's no color there, yet same mixture. They're classified as blacks. Why not do the same in our...
Cormo says, colored have the right to call themselves any term they want. Otherwise, they will think that they are robbed from near white status. Well, that's a
racist term, I think. Mixed race, it sounds better.
Well, you can keep them coming. Let us know. What do you make of this term colored? Should it be abandoned? Should it be scrapped? Let us know on the Twitter handle as well as on the Facebook page. But right now, let's get into business. Moody's Investor Services placed government Baa82 rating on review for a downgrade. The recent cabinet reshuffle is expected to feature prominently when the Congress of the South African Trade Unions briefed the media on its CEC meeting in a short while. And President Jacob Zuma is set to face one of the African National Congress's top structures in the cabinet reshuffle. Let's now go to Kendall Makamate to find out what's happening on the sports field.
Thank you very much, Elvis. Good morning to you. Quite a lot happening in the world of sports. First up, as you all know, out at the Dr. Petrus Molemela Stadium in Bloemfontein, the late, great icon is being laid to rest right there. As the pictures coming in from a little earlier on as his funeral procession made its way into the stadium. We also have a whole lot of other sporting news happening. We'll be bringing you updates, of course, from earlier last night when we had Cape Town City absolutely demolishing Chippa United. 4-1 beating them there, and we've got some beautiful stuff to show you. Have a look at this.
Yes, say that once. Surely a hat-trick, yes, a hat-trick.
Chippa United 4 top of the log on the back of Bongoletu Jaye's hat-trick, the fastest ever in.
We owe FIFA lots of money. There are players that could not be paid. They are signing on fees.
And recently relegated payment of former players and sign-on fees.
The court said that the City of Cape Town, we are proceed to claim back the 500 million rand.
And the giant WBA is fixing during the construction of the World Cup stadiums. And including stories about what's happening with the preparation for the Masters that's happening later on this week. Now, for now, I'll hand over back to Elvis, who's going to take us forward on Newsroom.
Kendall, top story this hour, in the final hour, The Congress of the South African Trade Unions, COSATU, will shortly hold a media briefing. The Federation is reported to say it has discussed the calls for President Jacob Zuma's meeting. Our reporter Griselda Lewis is at COSATU House, where the media briefing will take place here in Braamfontein in Johannesburg. A very good morning to you, Griselda. Now, we've heard reports that COSATU discussed the issue of the reshuffling. What do you know about that?
Well, Elvis, COSATU did hold its one-day special Central Executive Committee meeting here this morning about what the outcomes were of that meeting. But what certainly we do know is that high on the agenda of that meeting was the President's decision to reshuffle his cabinet. You know, of course, that COSATU has been very critical, in which the now former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan was recalled from the UK investment roadshow. Complete that investor roadshow in the UK, and basically had labelled the recall as being handled very recklessly. I think one of the other criticisms that we're expecting to hear from COSATU here as well is that they've already indicated that in the history of the ANC being in government, it was for the very first time that the president of the ANC did not discuss his decision to reshuffle his executive with the Trade Union Federation. So what COSATU is basically saying is that there should have been some consultation with some of the alliance partners. You'd recall, of course, in addition to what the outcomes would be of COSATU from that Central Executive Committee meeting, recall that one of the other alliance partners as well, the South African Communist Party, has already, after its Politburo, called on President Jacob Zuma to resign. So it'll be very interesting to hear what came out of that special Central Executive Committee meeting. Recall one of the other criticisms as well, in addition to the fact that COSATU says it was not consulted about the President's decision to reshuffle his cabinet. COSATU says it was robbed of the opportunity to put pertinent questions to the ANC President and the President of the country about the names of the ministers who he was deciding to sack from his cabinet, saying that, we recall, of course, one of the other criticisms was in the height of the SASA debacle, the payments, the social grants payment saga, was COSATU's call for the Social Development Minister Batabile Dlamini to resign. So COSATU says those perhaps could have been some of the pertinent questions raised with the President about why he was retaining some of the ministers that were deemed to be underperforming within his cabinet. So we're really expecting quite, an extensive feedback from the special Central Executive Committee meeting with COSATU yesterday. I think particularly important in light of the fact that one of the other alliance partners, the SACP, has already called on President Jacob Zuma to resign.
Griselda, has the COSATU leadership arrived as yet?
Not as yet on the first floor. Will take place. It's getting underway at 11:30 there, Elvis. So we're expecting just shortly before the media briefing does get underway, the leadership of COSATU will make their way into that boardroom where they will, importantly, as we continue to get reaction there, Elvis, from different sectors in society. And I think one of the proposing to junk status and the pending decision by Moody's as well, which we're expecting to hear, if not today, maybe tomorrow, but we understand before COSATU's a take would be on that in light because of the fact that Standard & Poor's had indicated that one of the major decisions that it has taken is taken because of the political instability in South Africa that will affect the poor and the working class in South Africa, of which COSATU does represent. So it'll be very interesting to hear from them what their call will be, whether they'll call for President Jacob Zuma to resign.
Griselda, thank you so much for your time. She'll give us an update later, and we'll probably cross there gets underway, so you'll have to stay tuned. You don't want to miss that one. Now, Moody's Investor Service has placed the government is likely to further shake investor confidence. It was prompted by that abrupt change in leadership of key government institutions, and it also comes after Standard & Poor's downgraded South Africa to junk status.
After Standard & Poor's earlier decision to cut the country's credit rating to junk status, all eyes were on whether the other two global ratings agencies, Fitch and Moody, by issuing a downgrade over the cabinet reshuffle, but future policy-making. The statement says the review will allow Moody's to assess these risks, institutional, economic and fiscal strength. The review will also explore political dynamics which led capacity to conduct sound economic policies which foster economic and fiscal strength. Standard & Poor's said internal government and party divisions could delay fiscal and structural reforms and protect had been established between business leaders and Labour. Sherwin Brycepease, SABC News, New York.
Now, Treasury has responded to the news that South Africa has been downgraded to junk status by the ratings agency Standard & Poor's. It says the status has lowered, which is denominated in foreign currency. Treasury says the debt in rands still it says this constitutes 90% of South Africa's debt. Now that's a good thing. S&P says the downgrade reflects divisions in the ANC-led government and the cabinet reshuffle by the President Jacob Zuma, the former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. S&P says the cabinet changes have put at risk fiscal and growth outcomes, and it will now be market. Treasury Gaba has said government remains a rise in public debt. Political commentators and business leaders say they support the opposition party's plans to hold a joint mass action against the President Jacob Zuma this week. Now, they say political developments around the country's leader have dented South Africa's image in Africa and abroad. President Zuma reshuffled cabinet, where the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan was axed along with his deputy, Mcebisi Jonas.
The political storm surrounding President Jacob Zuma's latest cabinet on South Africa's borders. The sacking of Pravin Gordhan and his deputy, Mcebisi Jonas.
South Africa's active role in a very big way. From what on the continent, how people are worried about how we pulled back Minister Zuma from Africa. I feel that we use them because she only served for a month, a year, for one term, and nobody achieves anything in a term. There are all sorts of things. They may be wrong, but then there is that thing about South Africa diminishing its political legitimacy, political currency as a leader on the African continent.
Siphamandla Zondi says despite the public outcry and disapproval from opposition political parties to President Zuma's latest cabinet reshuffle, South Africa remains a leading democracy on the continent. Meanwhile, Sipho Pitjana, chairman of Anglo Ashanti, a global mining giant, says South Africa's economic future is on the line. Speaking in his capacity as leader of the Save SA movement on Monday, Pitjana says global investors have lost confidence in the country's leadership.
Where does it take the decisions? And it is a disconcerting matter. So to hide behind prerogative is in fact mischievous, because in fact we have political parties represented in parliament, not individuals. He is a leader of a political party that chooses to ignore, to create a destabilization of our democracy and our economic system. And it shows part of the president.
Opposition parties plan to hold a summit to debate the state of the country. Dumalo Mohlaudi, SABC News, Tshwane.
Meanwhile, President Jacob Zuma is set to face one of the ANC's top structures in an extended National Working Committee meeting today. This over dissent within his party following the cabinet reshuffle. The top six met the president yesterday to air their concerns. Some publicly criticized the changes to his executive, including the firing of the finance minister. One of the ANC's alliance partners, COSATU, has now also placed the president's resignation on the table. This, while the South African Communist Party has already resolved that the president should go.
Which is a huge achievement.
Many are calling it the president's precipice,
Those issues must come back openly to the...
having to quell dissent in his own party
And I undertake to hold...
over changes to his cabinet. His first point of call, the meeting with officials.
The past few days have been very difficult for the ANC, and I think they've been difficult too for the country. Officials have requested more time to clarify themselves. As you're aware that you quoted, some officials went into public about the statement. They must give guidance included to the NWC, so that the NWC does not just sit, but will take cue in terms of leadership from the officials. Now the extended NWC is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon at 2. Extended NWC will include chairpersons and secretaries of provinces.
And collective leadership.
While some in the ANC lambasted the 3 top 6 for criticizing the president.
It has nothing to do with the merits and demerits of the reshuffle, but it's a build-up towards this upcoming national conference of the ANC. And it's a build-up to discredit not only the sitting president of the ANC. President Zuma is not coming back. It's known, he's on record saying that.
Meanwhile, COSATU has put the recent developments in the country on the agenda of its Central Executive Committee.
It is the first time in the history of the ANC being in government that President has reshuffled the cabinet without telling us or consulting us in that particular view. That in itself robbed us the opportunity to ask the president, because if he has called us and said, I want to remove this minister and all those things, we'll have asked him in good faith, why, President, are you changing these particular people?
Some analysts say it will be tough for the ANC to rise above this latest debacle.
The president has this prerogative to fire and hire. At the same time, that decision has got to be exercised, or that right has got to be exercised in a way that does not bring harm to the interest of the Republic. That's what the Constitution says. So in this case, the question is this decision in the interest of the Republic? And the chorus out there is that, no, it is not.
But the question remains, will the ANC emerge more divided or unified? Criselda Lewis, SABC News, in Johannesburg.
Let's move abroad now. At least 10 people in St. Petersburg. A Russian train exploded and wounded some 39 others yesterday. President Vladimir Putin has called the attack a possible act of terror.
Officials confirmed a second unexploded device was found at another station and deactivated. Initial reports suggest there had been 2 explosions, but it was later confirmed that there was a single blast on one train between 2 stations. Meanwhile, European Union foreign ministers have expressed their concerns.
Our condolences go to all Russian people, and in particular those who lost their loved ones. And we continue to follow the news coming from St. Petersburg with a lot of apprehension.
We don't yet know exactly what is behind this or who's responsible for this outrage, but clearly our thoughts are very much today with the families of the victims and with the people of St. Petersburg, just as a few days ago they were with the people of London.
I'm horrified by reports from St. Petersburg that several people have been killed and many injured. My first thoughts go to the victims, their families and close friends. France stands alongside Russia at this dark and painful time.
Russian President Vladimir Putin was in the city. Sophie Mkwena, SABC News.
That's your news for now. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back after that.
of the givers says it wants to resolve the issue diplomatically and amicably so. It still believes it could be a case of mistaken identity.
OPEC members Nigeria and Libya, both suffering setbacks in production, were given exemptions.
In 2016, the airline was voted the leading airline in Africa by passengers in the World Travel Awards. Currently transports more than 160 tons of cargo.
She won the Sun International Ladies Challenge, the Supersport Ladies Challenge and the 2016 Chase to the Investor Cup for Ladies Final.
Stay tuned to News Today, Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m. here on SABC News.
Lesotho's Prime Minister Bagadida Mosasidi remains firmly in power until the country goes to early elections on the 3rd of June. This after the Constitutional Court ruled that two cases, one challenging the election proclamation and the powers of the government to allocate public funds following the motion of no confidence, that failed.
A case that could have changed the course of events, seeking in the main to challenge the decision of the king to dissolve parliament and call elections following the advice of the Prime Minister.
The king acted constitutionally and lawfully in terms of Section 83(4)(b). The prayers cannot be sustained and are accordingly refused.
To challenge decisions made by the king based on the advice of a sitting Prime Minister have proved futile previously.
Where the king is required by this constitution to act in accordance with the advice of any person or authority, the question whether he has received or acted in accordance with such advice shall not be inquired into. In any court.
All systems go for both the legality to hold elections on the 3rd of June, as well as government's power to allocate provisional budgets, including a budget for the election. Ntakwana Ngatani, SABC News, Maseru, Lesotho.
Kenyans are this week remembering the victims of the Garissa University terror attack. 148 people, most of them students, were killed by gunmen linked to Al-Shabaab. On Monday, the United Nations in Nairobi hosted a memorial to mark 2 years since the attack. Survivors spoke of the terrifying moments during the attack and how the university has risen from that dark past to become a source of inspiration in the country's fight against violent extremism.
Remembering the victims of the Garissa University College attack.
They represented a brighter future for a region that has seen too much violence for far too long.
The emotional wounds are healing.
I even reside in the hostels where we were attacked, and I'm just there.
The physical scars remain, a constant reminder of the morning of the 2nd of April 2015, when armed Al-Shabaab militants stormed into the Garissa University College, shooting and maiming 148 people.
The person who shot me, as I was looking outside the lecture hall, where somebody from nowhere, in fact, shot me, and then he thought that it was all over.
The university has since reopened under heightened security measures, and a community that is now jointly facing the threat of terrorism and radicalization.
As we are speaking, currently we are having 581 students, of which 200 students are from government-sponsored who have been sent by coups. The rest are...
Now that's your news for now. President Zuma is officially launching the Trans-Africa Locomotive in Pretoria. Now, this is the first ever train that has been designed, engineered and manufactured locally by Transnet, which will serve the continent. Let's go there live.
Group Executive or Chief Executive of Transnet, Mr. Siabonga Gama, and management, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, a good morning to you all as we begin Freedom Month. This month, we look back at the gains we have made since the dawn of democracy. Some of the critical achievements are in the economic arena, especially regarding infrastructure development. It is important, therefore, that we are today launching this locomotive. Over the past 10 years, South Africa has grappled with the effects of a global economic downturn. We looked to some of our giant state-owned enterprises to keep the wheels turning during this difficult period. Companies such as Transnet and Eskom, with combined assets of more than 800 billion rands, not only employ masses of our people, but also crucially drive infrastructure development. They are at the forefront of technical innovation and the development of valuable African markets. What Transnet is showing us today is that it has the skills and far-sightedness to extend itself beyond its traditional strengths to include new value-added services in the logistics supply chain. In April 2014, Transnet announced the awarding of a 50 billion rand contract for the building of 1,064 diesel and electric locomotives. The majority of the locomotives are built at facilities here in Godospoort and also in Durban. 60% of their components are locally manufactured. This is important with regards to promoting domestic competitiveness and economic growth, as well as job creation. The Trans-Africa Locomotive project has provided an opportunity for Transnet to grow and diversify its business. Transnet research showed that there was a particular regional demand for a reliable kind of locomotive, relatively light and efficient locomotive that could ride these tracks and navigate their twists and turns. It is an African solution for an African problem, especially developed with African conditions in mind. The engineers responsible for the project have many years' experience modifying locomotives to meet unique African conditions. The Trans-Africa Locomotive Development presented an opportunity to put their great pool of knowledge into practice, and they have done us very proud. The locomotive they have developed is a general purpose machine that is ideal for South Africa or South African branch lines. It is also the perfect fit for most of the main lines in the SADC region, where infrastructure prevents the use of heavier locomotives which are more difficult to maneuver. The completion of this locomotive is a significant technological achievement by Transnet and the country. We appreciate Transnet's drive to become the leading provider of logistics services in sub-Saharan Africa. We must continue working hard to develop infrastructure that promotes trade among African countries and which make it easier for us to visit one another and also boost economic growth and development. Ladies and gentlemen, in the past week, I made changes to the National Executive. We expect the changes to add renewed energy into Cabinet and the Executive as a whole. We are proud of having added many young ministers, which is an investment into the future of government leadership. If we do not enable our young MPs to gain experience now, we may battle in future with leadership and governance experience within the National Executive. We congratulate all new pioneers, new appointees, once again. With regard to the finance portfolio, we reiterate that while the political leadership has changed, government's overall policy orientation remains the same as derived from the governing party, the African National Congress. We also wish to emphasize that government has been and will remain committed to a measured fiscal consolidation that stabilizes the rise in public debt. We extend our gratitude and appreciation to Minister Pravin Gordhan and Deputy Minister Mcebisi Jonas for their contribution to strengthening the National Treasury and the finance portfolio. We thank former Minister Gordhan for ensuring a smooth transition. Mr. Gordhan is officially handing over to Minister Malusi Gigaba this morning. This shows the maturity of leadership within the governing party. We appreciate the determination by both leaders to ensure continuity and unity within the portfolio. A united and stable national treasury and finance portfolio as a whole is absolutely critical for government and the country. I've directed Minister Gigaba and Deputy Minister Sifiso Buthelezi to immediately prioritize unity, peace, cohesion, and stability within the finance portfolio. This will enable all components of the portfolio to focus on the tasks at hand. It is also more important than ever now that we unite as a country and work together in light of the unrelenting socio-economic challenges that we face. We will continue to work with business and labor to take forward the work of the CEO initiative that was established last year to reignite growth while also strengthening the Presidential Business Working Group where we interact with all components of business. Minister Gigaba and his team will also be reaching out to the international investor community very urgently to assure them that South Africa remains a stable, reliable, and competitive investment destination. They will build on the good work that has been done thus far. Most importantly, we assure our people that government will do everything possible to promote cohesion, unity, and efficiency in government. We know that public statements which indicate disagreements within government by ministers, for an example, demoralize our people and create confusion. This is a serious weakness, and we shall attend to it within the renewed vigor. Ladies and gentlemen, since 2008, Africa has seen an average of 5% annual real GDP growth on average. That is more than twice the pace of the 80s and 90s, and ranks our beloved continent among the fastest growing economic regions in the world. South Africa must position itself to benefit from this market, especially during our difficult economic times. The focus on Africa continues to be a priority. Hence, the launch of this locomotive today. We have also stated that we need to refocus and reprioritize in order to radically transform our economy as decided by the governing party in 2012. We thus remain firm in our call that the economy needs to include the black majority in the ownership and control so that we can have sustainable and sustainability into the future. We will work with the private sector and labor to achieve the goals of meaningful, radical economic transformation, including state-owned enterprises like Transnet. Let me congratulate you, Minister, and your team on this successful project. Our infrastructure development project will certainly make a difference, not only in our country, but beyond our borders as well in the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to officially launch the Trans-Africa Locomotive. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you very, very much. In fact, you have outlined in your speech how busy you are. And so we are very, very appreciative.
Right, that was President Jacob Zuma launching a totally South African-made locomotive right here in South Africa. That locomotive was made, and that speech was in Pretoria. We take a short break. We'll be back shortly. Oh, it's not a break that we're taking. In fact, we do have a media briefing by COSATU that's currently on the go, and that is where we're going.
Reshuffle. We also noted that some members of the ANC top 6 felt that there was no meaningful consultation by the president. COSATU, though, has been here before because we were not consulted when the e-tolls were implemented, when the employment incentive tax was introduced, and when the preservation of the Provident Fund was introduced. While we hear and understand the frustration of some of the members of the top 6, we hope we have a renewed appreciation of the concept of a meaningful consultation now that they have experienced it themselves. Also, in assessing the latest development We also reflected on the re-emergence of the past undemocratic practices, which were previously used in the run-up to the ANC 52nd Polokwane Conference, in particular the use of the state institution and the SABC in factional battles, including the failure to consult ANC members and alliance partners. In the run-up to the Polokwane Conference, while dealing and responding to the undemocratic tendencies, COSATU said the following, and we quote, "We hope that should Jacob Zuma win, we'll see no more of such undemocratic practices, and that he will usher in a new era of democratic consultation and transparency." COSATU also look forward to the adoption of a new progressive policies and the implementation of those policies by government. The only scenario which will rightly be called a crisis will be if the government refused to implement the policies voted for by the conference. Only then will it be justified to call for a government to step aside. But we had earnestly hoped that our new leaders will prevent such a crisis from ever occurring, and close the quotes. This combined with the alleged undue influence that is apparently exerted by the Gupta family in the office of President Zuma, and a series of controversies surrounding President Zuma, like the Constitutional Court judgment and his apology on Nkandla, COSATU no longer believe that the president is the right person to unite and lead the movement. The alliance lead the movement, the alliance, and the country. We think that after all his undeniable contribution to both to the movement and government, the time has arrived for him to step down and allow the country to be led by a new collective at government level. We no longer believe his leadership abilities, and we shall be communicating the decision to our ally in the ANC. The CEC will also be demanding both government and the president to give us an explanation as why we were not consulted as an alliance partner and what led to the abandonment of such long-standing tradition. We are currently experiencing a period of deep division within the ANC, and we believe that the president's lack of constructive engagement has added such division, which impacts negatively to governance. He also failed to deal with some of the most incompetent ministers in his cabinet, proving that this cabinet shuffle was not based on merit, but on a political loyalty. We reject the prerogative argument because the ANC accompanied or campaigned not only as an individual, but as a team, and the voters gave mandate to the organization, not only to one individual. The president derived his mandate, like any other ANC deployee, from the movement itself. The Federation also plans to directly communicate this decision of the special CEC to its members, including discussing its implication. COSATU will also be talking to the alliance partners, or to all of the alliance partners, the community, religious and societal organization, to discuss this decision and the way forward. We'll have loved to communicate this decision internally with the ANC first, but in the absence of such engagement, we're left with no choice but to communicate our decision in public. But in all of our engagement, we'll be guided by our class interest and will not abandon our class position. Our strategic enemy is still monopoly capital, and white monopoly capital in particular, and we stand in opposition to neoliberalism and its ideologues, both inside and outside the movement. We also reconfirm that the unity of our organization and the alliance is sacrosanct, and also stand against corruption. We believe in collective leadership, and we stand in opposition to personality cult in whatever form. On the commitment to the alliance, COSATU want to make it clear that it is still very much committed to the alliance. We want an alliance which collectively develop policy in line with the vision of the Freedom Charter, which collectively monitors implementation of the policy, which collectively decide on deployment, and which can call ministers to account. We want an alliance where partners are treated as equals. We want a reconfigured alliance which is at the center of driving the national democratic revolution. We'll fight to have an alliance which is conscious that the primary task in this phase of our transition is to resolve the colonial and apartheid contradiction based on radical economic transformation. We want an alliance which is led by the ANC that understand and accept in practice the leading role of the working class as a primary motive force in the national democratic revolution. We want an ANC which accept and understand that the working class has an enduring organizational power, occupies a strategic location within the productive force, suffers the most from both exploitation and domination, and has made the most sacrifice to advance the revolution. We do not support the regime change agenda that wants to topple the ANC from power. We'll never march with the DA and its friends, and the only march we'll join that will be led by the DA will be if they are going to Cape Town to call for Zille to resign. We call on our members not to support any march to Luthuli House because we view this as an act of provocation. We also call on the ANC members to refuse to be led by opposition parties and to remember that the movement was given a mandate by the electorate in 2014. COSATU also condemns all those who are attempting to use school kids by calling for school boycott in order to fight their narrow political fight. On the global rating downgrade, we have also noted the decision by the rating agency, the S&P Global Rating, to downgrade South Africa to sub-investment grade. This is a significant matter for COSATU, which is first and foremost an economic entity with the responsibility to look to the interests of its members and the working class. We are worried because the junk status will have an inflationary result, as it will result in the increase in borrowing costs, not only for government, but across the economy. Currently, South Africa owes more than 2.2 trillion rands, which is more than 50.7% of the national income or the GDP, and pays about 160 billion per annum in interest payment, which is very close to what the government spent on social grants. What is more worrying also is that according to the National Treasury budget for 2017-18, totals of 1.56 trillion rands, of which revenues covered about 1.41 trillion. The remaining 149 billion will be borrowed, and there's a strong possibility the South African government will be forced to further raise taxes to fund most of its spending. This is unfortunately happens in the midst of stagnant economy with high unemployment, poverty, and inequalities. We express our disapproval of the credit rating agency, the S&P's decision to downgrade the country, and we view their reasons about political uncertainty as an interference in our democratic political affairs, which will be beyond their scope of work. We also hold responsible and capable the President of the Republic, President Zuma, because it is his inattentive and negligent leadership and disruptive actions that have emboldened these agencies to interfere in the country's political affairs. That's the end of our statement, Comrade Susan.
Thanks, Nopal. Yeah, we are going to allow you to ask 96 questions. We are going to take 5 for now. It's 1, it's 2, it's 3, it's 4, it's 5. Let's go.
Thank you very much, Clement Mangatela from Eyewitness News. I just want to ask, do you have anyone in mind? I see you calling the president to step down, but have you thought about someone who can take over from him now? And I just wanted to find out, I mean, the SACP, when they made the call, they also stated that they're actually strategizing on how to get President Jacob Zuma out of office. Did the CEC discuss strategies on how they can get the president out? And did you also discuss mobilizing your own members on the ground to try and put pressure on the president? Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for taking my question. It's been all from the age. If you look at history, the last time an ANC president was recalled, it led to a split within the ANC, which led to the formation of COSATU. Seeing now that history could be repeated itself, and COSATU is the latest ANC alliance partner to ask the president to step down. In this regard, does COSATU or is COSATU anticipating some sort of split in the ANC should the president be recalled? Second question, COSATU is having a central committee meeting coming up soon, and it is common practice for both the president and the deputy president to be invited. So see now that COSATU wants the president to step down, will COSATU still invite the president to this particular central committee meeting? And then my third question is related to, as well as not directed to the president of COSATU. Seeing now that either unanimously or the overwhelming majority of COSATU unions have asked the president to step down, how is your personal relationship with the president going on? And will it perhaps change due to this particular decision that COSATU is taking as a collective? Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Christopher Lewis, or it's still morning. Good morning, I'm Christopher Lewis from SABC Television. Just to the leadership of COSATU, I see that you mentioned here that combined with a series of controversies surrounding President Jacob Zuma, doesn't COSATU feel that speaking up now is rather too late given the crisis that South Africa finds itself in? You mentioned Nkandla as well and the Constitutional Court judgment. Should COSATU not have spoken out earlier before the crisis that South Africa finds itself in now, including the downgrade by Standard & Poor's? And my second question related to the alliance. We've seen what the SACP has said, we see what you are saying now, but what does this mean for the alliance going forward? Nobody wants to own up to the fact that there are cracks within the alliance, and cracks that we've seen now are basically cracks that we've not seen within the alliance so far. It's such a public displeasure for President Jacob Zuma. News 24. I just want to ask, what do you expect to come out of the NWC meeting, or rather, what do you want to come out of the NWC meeting?
Never go from the Times. I just wanted to get clarity with regards to COSATU's stance yesterday. I spoke to the spokesperson who sees about it, and he had stated that Manusi Kigaba was not the right man for the job as he lacks an economic background. Could you just please state your stance on Manusi's appointment, and if he's not the right person, who would you actually put in that position? Thank you. I'm going to take the last one, Mohamed. I don't believe that you have to address that question. I have addressed that question this morning on SABC on our and before the press briefing with the journalist, is out of order. Don't respond to that.
Let me try.
Yeah, try.
Thank you very much, Comrade Sizwe. And good afternoon to all the workers from the media houses present here. And I think it's worth starting in responding to this question to indicate that the Federation having to come to the conclusions that it did yesterday would have not been an easy path. It would have been a product of many attempts to reason, to persuade each other with the leadership of the ANC. So I'm raising that because Griselda is asking that question, that is it not too late that we've now spoken over these issues? As if COSATU was simply quiet. And that's the thing that has been pumped all the time to us, to the media and everyone. Now COSATU quiet. What's COSATU saying when this and that is happening? Sometimes by people who are very much irritated because they felt we're not saying what they want us to say. Not because we're not talking about the issues. We do speak about the issues and we've just outlined them here because we are a trade union federation whose principal task is to raise the issues affecting the working class and the workers in South Africa quite sharply and raise them where it matters most. For instance, where you have to say government's neoliberal policies are not helping us to create the jobs we want to create, because that is the issue we've been raising. I don't believe that we should then say it's too late. It's not too late. It can never be too late to raise a point, as we are raising this point, for people to sober up and act to correct themselves. It's never too late. We should do it, and we'll always do it all the time, even if it means marching into the street to make that point, even if it means we shall occupy certain houses in this country to make that point, and we'll never tire to make that point. So we believe that making it even today, we're sending a very, very clear message to the country and the leadership out there that indeed, as COSATU, it's up here. We cannot contain this anymore. We need serious responses to this particular matter. So I thought I needed to state that, Ms. Griselda, it's not too late in our view. Actually, the fact that you have come here to listen, we're happy with that, because you will send that message. For us, the call we are making is a very, very important call on the issues that we are raising. Going forward for the alliance, indeed, our statement does say we believe in this alliance led by the ANC, but we want a reconfigured alliance. And if we could have that engagement which puts the alliance at the center of the driving of policy in government and elsewhere, which means proper engagement and consultations that are meaningful amongst the leaders of the alliance, which treats each leaders as equals in the alliance, because we are equal. COSATU is not a stepdaughter in the alliance. When for the first time, such a big reshuffle was happening, we were not consulted. It's not a small thing for the Federation. It's not a small thing, and we're raising this point quite clearly, that we don't take kindly to not being consulted on this matter. The expectations from the ANC's NWC meeting, which started yesterday and continuing today, the workers of this country, the Federation COSATU, expects that out of that meeting, the comrades can show that the ANC is the leader of society by their conduct, by their actions, by their pronouncement. Even this thing of people talking in different terms about issues of more significance in the country, we hope that they will say it has stopped, that they are coming out there to lead this country as the leadership that has been elected by the ANC members to lead, the leadership that COSATU is an ally with, comes out of its NWC confident that they are united, they are going to fix the problems that are being raised, because there are many problems that are being raised. The ANC ought to say, this is how we're going to implement the socio-economic transformation in the radical form. Workers would want to hear the ANC that. Workers would want to hear the ANC leadership saying, we are doing away with factionalism, we've done away with the divisions, we've done away with slate politics, we've done away with a perception, reality or not, of arrogance. We are going to lead this country as the people of South Africa are expecting us. That's what we're expecting from that leadership. It's a great question we are raising, and we hope indeed they will give South Africans that type of a feedback after their meeting over the last few days. Leadership, I thought I needed to take those, but I need to signal, because we will not go into any detail with a matter which is still under consideration within the Federation, that this morning the office of the president or the president himself has called to say, can I meet COSATU? It is late as it is, but we are consulting how we're going to respond to that matter, because we want solutions to this kind. Let that not be confused about the calls COSATU has made here. Don't be confused. COSATU has made these calls here, but COSATU keeps its ear open because we are desperate for solutions. If there's a call that say, come, let's talk about this matter, the Federation is consulting within itself about that particular situation. I thought I should end there, comrades.
Let me just try to answer some of the remaining questions, and the comrades will add on. Who do we want, or who do we have in mind to take over from if Comrade JZ step down? I think the ANC is capable to fill that particular positions. The number of capable comrades within the ANC. The ANC was not found wanting when Comrade Thabo Mbeki was recalled. It moved with speed and filled that particular position. So we're not worried about who should be in this regard. On the question of the, somebody's pressing somewhere on this thing. On the issues of the question of what did we discuss, strategies did we mobilize on these issues, and I think in our statement we said we are going to be meeting with our members to explain the decision that the CEC has taken and listen to them in regard as to what is response do they provide with us. We're not making this call with an anticipation that it will be rejected. We think it will be seriously considered by the movement. And we said we still want to meet with the movement in our statement and the president to really express those issues and the feelings of the CEC in regard to our way forward. What will be our relationship with the president? Our relationship with the president is not based on the position he occupies. It's a relationship between members of the movement who come together because they got a particular mandate to deliver in these particular instances. Who are we going to invite to the Central Committee? In the invitation to the Central Committee, we invite organizations. We invite the alliance partners. We look to the question of the traditions, and we engage. It has not been at all times an individual to the history of COSATU that he has to be the president. At times was General Secretary General. I remember sometimes in the Central Committee we invited Terra Likota, who was then at the time the national chairperson as deployed by the ANC in regard to these particular issues. In regard to do we anticipate a split if we are calling for someone to resign? One of the issues that COSATU has been raising, which is COSATU, not necessarily the ANC, is that the leaders of the federation or leaders of movements must always remember that they are leaders for a particular period. They will come and go, but the organization must remain. That is our belief in that particular way. And anybody who loves his organization must bear that in mind. In the history of the ANC, it has not been the leaders that have led to the organization. When Comrade Thabo Mbeki was recalled, he never left the organization. He's still in the organization. Those who left it, they left for their own reasons. I think they wanted to be either, as we have seen with Terra and others, to be the president themselves. So when they see that they don't have chances in the ANC, they form Smolanyana Party to be their president. And we know how many members Terra Likota have now in parliament in regard to that greed of being the leader forever. So we don't anticipate a split. We anticipate a movement that will seriously discuss this particular issue. By the way, we make a note that President Zuma has made a great contribution to the movement. He got a history on these things. He spent years in Robben Island. He spent years in exile. He grew up in the ANC, occupying a number of particular positions. But there will be a time when there will be issues that, in our view, are beyond his capability to manage them properly. And it's for that reason that we're raising these particular issues and says the president has to step aside so that the mandate of the movement should be allowed to move forward. As one may add to the particular position, the question that was President started answering. The COSATU members have told us time and again they love the ANC. Even when there are difficult times, when we go to the congresses, the mandate that we have from the previous Congress is that COSATU members love the ANC as theirs, their movement, and they would do everything to build and strengthen the ANC because they think we need the ANC in the alliance. But on the equal basis, when there are things that they don't like, they've mandated us to raise without fear and favor in addressing those issues, and that's what we are doing. We've been engaging with the ANC. Is that sometimes we don't go publicly and engage with the ANC. Every time we meet the ANC, we don't call a press conference and say we are going to meet with the ANC. We met them in the Lekgotla, we met them in the ANC NEC, we met them before we go to the 8 January statement, we met them in the top 6. In the recent past, we've met the ANC on a number of occasions, and we are raising the issues that we believe the ANC needed to address. That's why our issues and our approach is not only to the president, because we said the president derives his mandate from the ANC. We talk to his movement, and we want, as Comrade President was saying, that their pronouncement and that articulation on the radical economic transformation and the fight of the corruption must be seen not as a once-off, but it must be embedded in the program of the ANC. Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right. No. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll take the other last 3. We'll start to talk with you.
Thank you, Mr. Kamara. I think we need to take emotions out of the question. For the benefits of those who didn't listen to RFN and SABC, can you just please answer my question?
Tell them what you have.
Because not just translates in regards to Moody City appointment.
Regards to?
No. You said this press briefing.
Or the Malusi matter?
No. This press briefing, it's a COSATU press briefing. You see, if you ask stupid questions, you are going to get stupid answers. You know what I said to you with regards to IGABA. I was talking to you before the press briefing. It's not for this platform, that discussion. But it's the leadership.
It's relevant. You can't speak about cabinet reshuffle and not say that my question is not relevant.
Now we're passing. Someone else?
I just need to try to create a rift
between Caesar and us. Behave, ne?
No.
Behave.
I'm asking a question.
No.
You yourself.
Now we're out of order.
Please
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. It's Khoe and here from ENCA. Like you've just stated as NOBs that COSATU has reached a conclusion calling for the president to step down. I mean, for quite a number of times, this has been, quite a buzzword, as it were. So what will you do consistently now to make sure that what you want to see happening actually happens? And with regards to the issue of the credit rating agency, S&P's junk status outlook, what would you suggest the country do now to resuscitate itself, given the fact that obviously this will have the dire consequences for the country? Thank you.
Amanda?
Marika from Jack Ryan FM. Just on a point of clarity for me, firstly, I know you have to go and discuss this with the ruling party and everything. What are the technical steps that happen from there? You guys obviously brought this motion quite seriously for them to listen to. What happens from there? Say they agree with you, what are the steps to be taken? And then also we're looking at the motion of no confidence by the opposition parties, and we're waiting to hear from the speaker whether she'll recall the National Assembly earlier. Would you prefer it to go through the National Assembly?
All right, cutting out of that media briefing, hearing from the General Secretary, Becky and Chali of COSATU, saying that as COSATU, they've asked the President to step down. They no longer believe in his leadership abilities. That's the main point coming out of that briefing. I'm rushing through this. We'll bring you more on what came out of that briefing, but for now we want to take you to the Finance Minister's briefing after South Africa was downgraded to junk status. Let's go there live.
Thank you very much for the questions. If you'll remember that when I spoke on Saturday, I indicated that I had spoken to Moody's and Fitch. I did not mention S&P because when I walked into office on Friday, they had already made their decision. They had taken the decision. They did afford us the courtesy of informing us. So by Friday already when I arrived, the decision had been made, and we felt that at that point it was not necessary to talk to them because we were not going to change the decision, but we are intending to talk to them going forward. So there are plans, as I make briefly, because the detail of my meeting with them have not been finalized. I think as soon as they are finalized in the next few days, I will make the announcements. I do intend leading a delegation of business people, labor, various other stakeholders to meet with the ratings agencies and some of the banks. But the details of that and the relevant consultation with the relevant stakeholders are not yet ready. So we will inform you about that. So we are going to talk to them. As well as those that are, including Moody's and Fitch, because the Fitch decision is expected on the 7th of April. Is it April or May?
They've brought it even closer now.
Oh yes, they've brought it closer. So whatever decision they make, we are intending to go and engage with them because we do need to address the perceptions about the political stability, the risks and uncertainties they are talking about, the policy uncertainties that they have, to reassure them, as we say, of our decision. I don't want to call it a decision, of our intention to stay the course, because there's not been a change in governments. There's been a change in the political executive in the department. I have had consultation with my predecessors. Our discussions covered a whole range of issues, but were not concluded. And we are going to meet again to continue with the conversation with them on all the matters that they need to hand over to us. The officials themselves, led by the DG, are also going to give us a briefing. And so the reason I did not take you into my confidence with regard to the S&P decision is because they had also taken me into their confidence. And so I could not undermine that courtesy which they accorded me by further divulging the contents of what they had disclosed to me in confidence. And I think it's just a matter of principle and